lifestyle. Sports cards and we live now. Jeremy Lee in the building and every guest that you ever needed. Sports cards after hours keep the hobby heated. Updates, hobby talk like you never seen it. Sports cards live and none could ever beat it. Sports cards is a lifestyle. Sports cards and we live now. Welcome to another episode of Sports Cards Live with your host, Jeremy Lee.
What is up, everybody? We are back yet again for episode number 263 of Sports Cards Live. It's Saturday night, March 29th, 2025, and my name is Jeremy Lee. Guys, tonight's going to be a great show. Tomorrow is the Fanatics Collect weekly auction-ending watch party featuring all four major sports. I'm excited for that and to expand the scope of that show. Two great episodes in the archives already, and we're going to do number 3 tomorrow night. Guys, if you are looking to add a Grail to your collection, I personally recommend that you consider using Fund Your Cards, the hobby's leading consolidator, and I am one of their latest clients with the Joe Jackson purchase. Check out fundyourcards.com. You will find their proprietary client portal. It is cutting edge and awesome and easy to use. Guys, also, please do me a favor. Check out mintink.ca. Mint Ink is Canada's leading hobby brand. They offer online shopping, worldwide shipping, grading, trade nights, all sorts of great things happening at Mint Ink. Follow Mint Ink on Instagram and check out mintink.ca. And guys, GP Sports Cards as well. They do live hockey breaks here on YouTube. Check out GP Sports Cards and their retail outlet, Total Sports. Happy to announce that GP Sports Cards and myself and Sports Cards Live, we are teaming up for the Expo social event Thursday night coming up here in just under a month. And guys, if you are looking for a gem mint in sports statistics, Rolling Insights provides you with high quality data, which is for everybody. A lot of businesses out there are trusting their data feeds to power their platforms with real-time statistics, box scores, player and team performance, so you can finally ditch those messy spreadsheets. Whether you're running a business or just for the love of the game, check out rolling-insights.com. Ben Hosler from Rolling Insights will be joining us in a couple of hours. And guys, Chronosio is the ultimate card inventory manager on the market. Imagine an inventory tool that does all the heavy lifting for you with state-of-the-art AI autofilling. It is 90% accurate. If you sell on eBay, you will love their fully integrated connection. It's been a trusted part of the eBay community since 2017. Millions of cards have already been sold on eBay using Chronosio. If you have 100 cards, you might not need it. If you have 1,000, 5,000, 250,000 card, Chronosio is the right solution for you. Check out home.chronosio. That is just like my shirt says. That's the spelling, home.chronosio.com. And if you'd like to sell your cards on eBay and you'd like the professionals to handle it for you, reach out to me directly and I can be your Slab Sharks representative, your point of contact, your hobby coach, if you will, and help you convert some of your cards into cash that way. Guys, this show is available on all the podcast platforms. Please subscribe, leave a rating or review. I greatly appreciate that. And always appreciate all of the loyal viewers and listeners here on the live streams and on the podcast. Tonight, we're going to try to get to as many of your comments and questions as we can. They are hopefully we'll get more in play this time than we have been lately. Let's bring out our co-host from the beaches of Santa Cruz, California. Mr. Joe Perau is back. What is up, Joe?
Hey, Jay Lee. Good to be here with you tonight. How are you doing?
I am doing well. And there's a couple of reasons why I'm doing well. First of all, it's Saturday night. This is what I want to do every Saturday night, is hang out with you, the rest of our guests who are joining us shortly, and the chat, of course. And before I get into too much, let's say hello to the chat, because the chat is like the sixth guest or whatever you want to call it, right? We got Stooks with us, guys. And if you have a YouTube channel and I'm not shouting you out, let me know you have one. I may not know, but I know Stooks does. Check out Stooks Baseball Cards and Curiosities. Laura, what is going on? Welcome to the show. We have Kevin Hawthorne in Lakeland, Florida, 1956 Tops guy. That is Matthew. He'll be joining us in about 10 minutes here on the screen. Jacob Dahl is here. Pastor Greg, what is up? Mike Double V. Look at that. Litzy Sports Cards is here. Good evening. Show Day Cart. Welcome to the show. Stale Prod. Chasing grails is the best part of collecting. The chase to get your grail is the pinnacle. I feel like I can speak to that now, maybe for the first time. Steve Clifton, what is happening? Robert Scott, good to see you. Good to see. Hey, Stuke says, yes, Mint Ink is awesome. Good to hear. Good to hear. Midlife says, love this topic. The toughest question decision in card collecting. Triple V, howdy to you. Thank you for the congratulations. Southern Collector, Tony in the house.
Our guy.
My new guys. What's up, Tony? What is going on? Good to see everybody. Midlife Sports Card Greg is also here. One of my absolute favorite YouTube channels. Laura says, this part of the program reminds me of the commercials before the movies. Hey, that's what we do. We shout out those who support us here on Sports Cards Live, and I'm grateful for all of the sponsors and partners that I've managed to make relationships with. I could not be prouder of that for sure. Stuke says, Jolton Joe, no doubt about it. Mookie Chilson is here as well. Good to see you. Dan's Vintage Baseball PC, another great YouTube channel. What's up, Dan? David Chase, what is going on? Kinger is here. Good to see you. Mookie Chilson has a YouTube channel, everybody. He has a YouTube channel. He thinks I wouldn't like it, but he would probably be very, very wrong. What's up, Jeff's Card Journey? Welcome to the show. Pastor Greg's Vintage Cards has a YouTube channel, guys. Check it out. These guys are here hanging with us on Saturday nights. Let's hang with them when they release their videos. Thank you, Pastor Greg, Mookie, Chilson. We got Dan. We got, of course, Southern Collector Tony with the channel, Stukes with the channel, Midlife with the channel, etc., etc. I think I hit up most of you guys in the chat right now. I hope I did. Anyway, all right, so Joe. Okay, I have a couple updates, and we're going to talk about this more tonight because this episode is a lot about the whole process that we go through when we consolidate into a card. And there's a lot of big decisions, lots of thinking, lots of pain, lots of pleasure, I guess you could say. But today was kind of a neat day because I managed to track down the person who owned the Joe Jackson like 2 owners ago. So the card sold in, I believe it was 2021. It sold on Heritage Auctions, and it sold, May of 2021. It sold on Heritage Auctions. And at that time, it sold to the person that I purchased it from. I thought that happened later. I made a mistake. I spoke wrong earlier, a week ago or whatever. The guy I bought it from was P. Ryan. He's owned it since 2021. He's the one that converted it from a SGC 2.5 to a PSA 1.5. And in any event, somebody reached out to me and said, hey, I know who used to own that card because their name is mentioned in the Heritage listing, and went on to tell me I used to read his articles in the Old Cardboard magazine. I'd never heard of Old Cardboard. So I went to Old Cardboard, I found it, and I couldn't find anything about this old owner named John Esch. So I messaged the editor on the website. I said, hey, my name's Jeremy. I'm trying to get a hold of John Esch. I bought a card he used to own. I'd like to learn more about it. Is he still alive? If so, can you potentially put me in touch? Get an email back 15 minutes later to me and John Esch saying, hey, John, please see below. Jeremy wants to get a hold of you and I hope you're well. And so John responds. Then I respond. I say, John, here's what my name is Jeremy, blah, blah, blah. Love to talk. He writes back. He goes, does this have anything to do with the Joe Jackson? I wrote back. I said, well, yes, it does. He said to me, maybe a phone call wouldn't work. I'm very hard of hearing, but if you want to work with email, that's fine. Or I have he's got, I guess, a special phone at his office where maybe it does put words on the screen for him. But so I sent him a list of questions about the card, and I'm now waiting to hear back. And
cool.
And one of the things I said in the email to him was that, when I own a special card, I want to know as much about the card as I can, the history of it, and so I here's what I said. I said to him, I said, I love the hobby and the provenance of my special cards is very important to me. So I'd love to know more about how long you owned it, how and when you acquired it, any previous owners you're aware of, and if possible, how long they owned it. I said, I assume it would be impossible to trace it all the way back to its original box of Cracker Jacks, but I would love to be able to go back as far as possible and trace its origin before getting to me. So we'll see what he knows. I'm waiting for that email, but I'm so excited at the prospect of learning so much more about this card. And it just enhances the overall experience of owning it. And even though I don't even have it in hand yet, it'll enhance the overall experience for me. I think provenance is important, so I'm excited to learn more about it that way. Joe, what do you think? Are you interested in the history of certain cards that you own or maybe covet to own one day?
Well, first of all, congratulations on getting the call back. That's amazing that you have a sort of, connection to whatever Mr. Esch might know. And yeah, I mean, especially in the realm of pre-war cards, but even in 50s and 60s, I'm in the habit, and especially when I was picking up a lot of vintage in the 2010s, 2015s, of reaching out and saying, is there any information, after I buy the card, or it's an auction, or and sometimes people like, no idea, but sometimes they have really cool stories, which does enhance your experience of owning the card. So I'm 100% into the idea of provenance, because these cards have journeys, and the uniqueness and your appreciation for it, I think, is just amplified when you understand more of where it came from. And sometimes you can get to the bottom, to the very beginning almost, but sometimes you can't. And so then you have to figure, okay, well, from 1950, that's what we know of the card, or 1970, that's what we know of the card. But I wish you luck. I look forward to the next installment when you get to have some of these questions answered.
Yeah, me too. I hope that he can go back, pretty far. I have no idea. Hopefully he owned it for 20, 30 years. That would be pretty cool. We'll find out. I hope to find that out. And I asked the chat and other, people who collect pre-war vintage. To me, a modern card, the provenance isn't as important, unless it's maybe like a memorabilia card, a patch card, just so you know that the patch hasn't been tampered with or switched out. I think it can be important there. But when it comes to a card that's 100 years old, it's kind of neat. Like you said, the cards have been on a journey. If they could only tell their story, how interesting would it be to hear the story of the history of their cards? And I just wonder if other people think that way. And I went on to tell him at the end, I said, if we are at all similar as lifelong collectors, I know that when I move on from a card that I owned for a long time and loved greatly, I always want to know that it's going into a good home and good collection. And I want to assure you that your old Joe Jackson has found its home for at least the next 20 years. It's kind of, I don't know. It's kind of a funny thing.
And not surprisingly, I mean, this is stating the obvious, but card condition is usually connected to the story, of the journey of the card, right? So, in some instances, somebody may have been very meticulous in how they took care of their cards. I mean, you hear those stories sometimes of people. Then you have the scrapbook kinds with a little bit of paper loss. And I think part of the reason I love the story just for story's sake, but I also love the story because it also helps me kind of maybe imagine how this card went from its quote unquote pristine out of the pack or out of the box of Cracker Jacks or out of the tobacco pouch state to what we have in front of us today. And that's a really cool component to that.
I mean, our cards are born out of the packaging that they come out of, whether that was a cigarette pack, a box of Cracker Jacks, a chocolate bar with gum, or how they come today. Dan's Vintage says, I have a fairly new Instagram too. Matthew's one of my favorite follows. Yeah, Dan's Vintage Baseball PC on Instagram. I'm following him. You should be too. Piccolina the Cat, what's going on? The greatest 1-2 punch Saturday night. Appreciate that. David Chase, the best YouTubers in the industry, are with us tonight. Ain't that the truth? Sammy Thunder among them, guys. Another great YouTube channel. Southern Collector says Matthew has a great IG and phenomenal collection. Very nice comments right there. Appreciate that, everybody. Skeppy says, why pursue the depth history of the card? Is it because of what it's sold for? I'm sure other cards have captured your curiosity in the past. What drives you the most on this one? It's the story. It's not the value. I mean, I can find values on value is irrelevant. Like before card ladder data. It doesn't really matter what a card sold for up until 2010 because the industry is in a different place. The hobby's in a different place. So no, it's got nothing to do with value. It's the story. It's simply the story of the item. Steve Clifton says, I'm holding out for the shoeless Joe Jackson relic card. Yeah, that'd be very, very cool for sure. All right, Joe. So tonight's episode, we're going to talk about consolidating. And it's not just like, what did you do? It's what was going through your mind when you were deciding to do it, what cards you were going to maybe sacrifice, what cards did you salvage after maybe thinking you had to sacrifice them. And what was it? And then you acquire your grail. And in the weeks, months, years afterwards, how are you doing emotionally with the cards you let go? Do you miss them? Do you replace them? We're going to hear from Matthew on that for sure. Let's bring him on. Matthew, you ready to go? All right, guys, please welcome Matthew, the 1956 Topps guy. Look at this. We're all in a row here. I'm going to try to see how to fix that right now, guys. Hold on. Now we're all over there. 1 second here.
No worries.
How do we? There we go. What's up, buddy? How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great, man. I've been really looking forward to this ever since you texted me. I was like, oh man, this is gonna be a good one. This is gonna be huge.
I'm glad to have you. You know Joe. Joe, say hi. Matt, say hello, fellas.
Good to see you, Matt.
Joe.
Good. Notwithstanding a little funky internet, sorry about that. I might jump to my phone at some point, but great to have you here, Matthew.
Oh, I'm so excited.
So let's get into it. First of all, we're going to put the question to you. I was just discussing, the history of these cards. How do you think about that? Did that resonate with you at all, Matt, when you picked up your 52 Topps mantle? And I know where you got it. I know when you got it and all that. I was there. But did you ask any questions? How curious are you about the history of the card and its travels getting to you?
Yeah, I'm super curious. I haven't. Okay, I've taken some passive steps. So actually, I've posted on Instagram, multiple times, and actually had a guy reach out to me and say, "Hey, I had that card. I sold that card," and he told me where he got it from. Like, I guess it was an older gentleman who had like a huge stash of cards. Went through a little bit of a flipper vortex kind of situation before it landed in my hands. But with respect to that question you got earlier, I feel like, especially with these kind of big cards, the special cards that you kind of really hold dear in your collection, kind of any piece of information you can get about that particular example, it just, creates even more value in like uniqueness and bond between you and the card. You're stepping into this lineage that the cards had, and in your case, since 1914, some kid gets it out of a Cracker Jack box, ideally at a baseball game or something, right? And now you're part of that story. So like, who wouldn't be curious about the story? Like, I know that Matty C with his really nice 52 Topps mantle, he has like a really, he knows the guy, he's communicated with the person who like pulled it from the pack, right? And like just being able to make that person to person connection and make that like that lineage very crystal clear. There's something very powerful about that. And I feel like it definitely takes like that's like next level collecting, right? It's like almost like this like emotional attachment that deepens when you have that information.
Yeah. Sorry, I just see a comment from Bob Boozle says, I'm showing the best posture I've seen in years. Must be honest. Thank you, Bob Boozle. Yeah, Matthew, it's Matty C's story is really cool that he actually spoke to the person who pulled it out of a pack for a 52 Topps mantle. That's unbelievable. I don't know the full story there, how he found that person or how many owners there were, but that's a really neat thing. The person who literally delivered it from its womb. And it's so interesting that way. And I guess I wanted to ask you, Matthew, also, I know the story. Not everybody listening, watching would know it because we probably have some new people with us, but you consolidated into a 52 Topps mantle at the Burbank show. What I know I've asked you this before, but how many years is that? 2.5, 3 years ago now?
So that was March 2023 when I got that card.
So 2 years ago now.
Yeah,
2 years have gone by. And I remember seeing you at the show after you got it, and you had to give up lots of great cards. And you mentioned that to me. You said, you're like, hey, I got it. And you
Uh,
showed it to me. I was like, bro, like, congratulations, you know?
mhm.
And you showed me the cards you gave up for it. And I felt bad for you that you had to give up so many great cards, but you did what you had to do. And I guess the question I want to know about from you is, how did you feel? How have you felt since then? It's been 2 years. Did you miss those cards? Did you feel urgency to replace any? Have you replaced some? Where is that all at now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, so it was in early 2023. So there were 16 cards in the deal plus a little bit of money that went to get the mantle. And they were 16 like bangers. Like they were like really they were really good cards. It'd take too long to list them all, but there were like Gowdy Ruth, Leaf Jackie Robinson, Ty Cobb, T206, Hank Aaron rookie card, Michael Jordan rookie card. It was like a lot of really good cards. And it was a roller coaster, right? Because you get the high of, oh, this is the card I'm gonna get. Like, what is it gonna feel like to have a mantle? You start to like kind of start to believe that future a little bit of like what it's gonna be like when you own the card. But then there's the roller coaster of, oh crap, now how do I what do I have to give up to get this card, right? And I had kind of gone into it. This took place at a card show, right? So I had gone into it with maybe 4 or 5 cards that I kind of knew what their story would, how it would play out in my collection, in the sense that they were cards that I liked, but I had owned them long enough to understand what about them, I kind of was ready to move on from. Either, there was something about the eye appeal of the card I wanted to upgrade, or maybe, like, for example, I had the Hands at Chest T206 Walter Johnson. And that was a cool card, but I was like, man, I really want the portrait. Like, that's the card I want. So I kind of knew that, that one was going to move. So there was like a small amount of cards that I knew, I kind of had a plan for. And then, but that, then there's a huge gap between that and, what I needed to come up with for the mantle. And so then it was really like, I think, you had Joe, when you went through your experience, and I feel like it was definitely one I couldn't have gone through alone. So there was so much communication with my buddies about like, oh my God, like this card or that card. And I guess, there's two important things to play. Obviously, there's some number that you're trying to come up with. So like the valuation of the card is key. But the thing that you're playing with in your head is more about time, right? Like how much time is it going to take for me to replace this card? And there are some cards, and those aren't necessarily correlated, right? There are some cards that there's a particular example that you found and you just love, and maybe it's only worth like one eight, 1/10 of what you need to come up with, but you're like, no way, no way I'm going to move that one, right? And so for me, it was working through it with friends, giving me advice about what to hold on to, what to move. So that was really key. But ultimately, it came down to like, how hard is it going to? What's my estimate for how hard is it going to be to replace? And I got that wrong on a few of them. I thought it would be easier in some of those cases. And in particular, one of the cards that kind of like I felt like destabilized my identity as a vintage collector was trading the '54 Hank Aaron. So I knew that the example I had wasn't one that was like my forever example, right? I liked it, but I didn't. I knew I kind of wanted to move it, but it took me a lot longer than I thought to get another one of those, and like not having it just like made me nervous. I felt like it's like I don't have a Hank Aaron rookie card. What am I even doing? So I had to kind of develop some patience with myself about some of those things. But I think, and I've mentioned this to you before. I ended up once I figured out those 16 cards, I kind of could draw a line from that card to what my plan was to do next,
Right.
for each of them. And in some cases, it was like, not buy again or buy again, but this different thing about it. And, it's really set up, at least, I'm still doing it. Like just recently, I got a 39 play ball Joe DiMaggio, which I had been searching for freaking months, to find it again. And I just now got it. So I felt like it put me, not only did I get this incredible card that I never thought I would have, but it also put me on this trajectory, this very clear trajectory of what I wanted my collection to do. And I feel like that is maybe the coolest part of the consolidation process, is it allows you to refocus your collection to really take a very sharp eye to what your collection looks like and ask, what do I want it to look like? And now I have this cool foundational piece. How do I build off of that in an intelligent way? And I felt like it was so clarifying to have that kind of trajectory laid out that I thought was like a very satisfying experience overall.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's so interesting to hear about how it's one thing about the consolidation, but the aftermath is so interesting. You only gave up 16 cards. I say only because in my deal, I'm giving up over 300 cards
Wow.
to get in because I have trouble giving up my best cards. So I'm trying not to. I'm trying to salvage as many of those as I can. And I've been pretty successful doing that. There's one funny piece of this whole process. I made a lot of progress on it about 3 nights ago where I took out all my cards, a spreadsheet, and started with how much I have to come up with and worked my way backwards. And I did put in a couple big cards. And one of them, I for sure didn't want to move. My 48 Leaf Jackie Robinson, a card that held the title, is my favorite card in my collection for many, many years. But my strategy was moving out of cards that are high print run, where the value is often tied up in the not even the condition, but the grade, So, but I just couldn't do it. So I was telling Joe, I had everything done. I was done. I had the cards ready to go. I've got 3 boxes of cards that say Joe Jackson Fund on them.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm like, okay, I have to do a consolidation within a consolidation. I now have to buy back my Jackie Robinson 48 Leaf. So I went to other cards and it's so funny. I consolidated into the Jackie so I could salvage it. And I managed to do that, but I've had to sacrifice some great cards, and I'll get into a bit of that. Before I go to more comments though, and there's some great ones, Joe's been listening along, taking some notes. I want to go to Joe and get his comments on your stuff, Matthew, and anything else that comes to mind.
Thanks, Jay Lee. Yeah, I really liked what you said, Matthew, about cards that you maybe have another alternative play. You mentioned, I think it was the Walter Johnson. You prefer the portrait, which I do too, by the way. But that is something I think that you really start to kind of fine tune, and it may be a condition issue. It may be something particular to the technical grade versus what it's worth to you. Which brings to the forefront the notion that in a way it's almost like you're reacquiring these cards that are already in your collection as you're choosing to hold them, or of course sell them as you're potentially trading them. And Jay Lee's anecdote there of getting his own Jackie back. It's like the box within the box, right? It's like his own little, and maybe that just sort of, shows the mania that we have as sports card collectors. We're kind of going in circles and thinking through things in a hyper focused way. But yeah, I really like what you said about just considering both timeline and also output and or optionality for some other issue. Could even be the same issue, but in the case of T206, or it might be, you mentioned Joe DiMaggio. It might be that you prefer the Leaf DiMaggio to the play ball DiMaggio, and you'd rather go color. So anyway, that's a great thing to keep in mind. I'm sure we're probably going to hear more in that theme moving forward tonight.
Yeah, so that's awesome. I think there are 2 things that jump out at me in what you said. Number one was, this concept of kind of utility value, that it's not like owning the cards isn't just, when you go to move them in consolidation, it's not just like what, their value that they're bringing to that conversation is not just how much they're worth, but just the fact that you've owned them and you've kind of experienced them that has refined your taste in a way that it's not really measurable, right? It's matured your collecting direction in a way that's like not directly measurable. So there's that value. The other piece of it was, and I think this is something I've talked about with David Spinrad, the Rated Rabbi, quite a bit, which is that when you think about your cards and your collection, you almost always think about, the cards you actually own. But then there's actually this middle tier of the cards that you want, and they're kind of in your collection. That you don't own them, but you kind of there's a different they feel different than the cards that are just out there. So there's three categories, and that middle category is a really interesting one. And going through this process of consolidation, at least for me, really helped to like clarify that space. And even though you don't own the card, you kind of know the card, and it's kind of you're just waiting for it, right? And it's almost as if those cards, are a key piece of defining what your collection actually is, which is kind of a cool concept.
It's a neat thing to think about that way. And we all have our want list, or the top few targets on our list, and we have some people in the chat mentioning that they are going for big targets here in the near future. We'll get some of those comments, but I've never thought of it that way, Matthew, in that, like, the 33 Gehrig that I don't own yet, or the 41 play ball DiMaggio that I don't own yet, but I still obsess about them. Yeah. I want them, and the right copy, especially the green roof is one that's recently hit, I've taken a fancy to. We look at them, we see them, we consider various copies, but yeah, finding the one that we really want. And then, you mentioned refining your collection. Going through this consolidation process does allow you to refocus, or, we're going down our journey, our collecting journey. We're going down the road, the path, and we kind of think we know what we're doing. And then you do something big like this, let's say you go through a major consolidation experience. And then that path, you take a little turn. I'm not saying that you're steering right off the road, but you might just adjust the steering wheel a little bit, and it just takes you to a different destination than you otherwise would have gone to. And I'm really feeling that right now. One other thing I'm doing is I'm using this as an opportunity to clean out my PC of cards that just don't fit anymore. Right from low end, like I've got a bunch of literally under $5 and under cards that I'm going to be moving as part of this process, right up to the tens of thousands of dollar cards, because it takes it. When I put the Jackie in to my spreadsheet that night, 3-4 nights ago, it really helped accelerate the process of getting to my target number. And then you get there, and then it's not done. Like, the process is not done at that point. That's the first draft of it. That's, the first run at it. And then it comes down to, okay, now what am I going to change? I still have all these cards here that are not being sacrificed. These ones that I'm considering sacrificing. What tweaks to that do I want to make? And for me, it wasn't 16 cards. It's hundreds. So I think I'm maybe just the nature of my collection, Matthew. I may have, I don't know the breadth of your collection, but perhaps I had more options because I just have more cards. I was pulling from 1,600 cards or so, and like 300 are going. It'll be a bit more than 300 that are going to go after. And this is the Jackie that I salvaged. I just pulled it out, and it's badly off-centered, but I love it for what it is. And I thought to myself, maybe I could, it's an off-centered PSA 6, but it's got great color registration, corners, edges. And I thought, well, maybe I could, get out of that and purchase a really nice, I don't know, VG or VGX or whatever it would be, a 3, a 4, something like that, even a nice 2.5. But then I realized, what, I've owned this card for, I think I picked this up 12 years. I think I've owned this card. I don't want to move it. I am attached to this particular copy, even though it's as off-centered as it is. So
it's funny. Just real quick, I was just going to say, some cards land in our collections, and our connection with them makes their value, exponentially larger and larger, and it becomes harder and harder to ever think of getting rid of them. And some, and there's not always rhyme or reason to this. We may have coveted for a long time, finally got them, and we own them for a little bit, and it's not, is for some reason we don't make an emotional attachment to them. So it's just interesting to notice that. I'm always stunned at the cards that I find. It's like the moment of truth, and it's like, no, I can't give that one up.
Right. It becomes very challenging. And I did have to make some tough decisions, but we have Josh Adams, if Midwest Vintage Cards, going to join us as well. We're doing it a bit different this week, guys, to the chat and everybody. The guests know because they saw the schedule, but to the chat. And if you're watching on Instagram, please feel free to come on over to you. I see 8 of you on there right now. Come on over to YouTube, guys. That's where the action is. Join us in the chat. But tonight's show, we're actually going to bring in the guests quicker and keep them on longer because we have fewer guests than we've had. I just felt that that was the right way to approach it this week. But before we bring on Josh Adams, I want to get to some more comments here, okay? Because there's some great stuff. We're going to start with Dan. He says, I'm sacrificing some big cards for a huge target at Strongsville. It's tough to say goodbye. I get that, Dan, and good luck to you in Strongsville, and can't wait to find out if you're successful. Hope you are. Can't wait to see what it is. Jake Dahl says, now I want to pick up a 1956 Topps card tonight. right away. Right away. Dan goes on to say, you have to let them leave the nest when they are ready, Bob. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Stuke says, one of my friends who is no longer with us has had his story printed in SCD about his search for the 33 Gaudi Lajoie and finally getting the card from the company. Would be cool to see who has it now. No doubt. Splendid sports cards. What is going on? Welcome to the show. Midlife. Greg says, this is so on topic for me. I've been texting a dude in Santa Cruz about possibly consolidating into a Jackie. Who do we know in Santa Cruz, right? David Chase says to Matthew, do you still keep your 52 mantle on the pillow next to you when you sleep? I would. My poor wife. He's got it. There, he's got it in his hands right there. It goes everywhere with you, doesn't it?
It's always with me.
Always with him.
Some form or another.
We got the professor. Good evening, Professor Jeff McMahon. Welcome to the show. Vintage card collector Matthew, did you consider the future value / cost of entry on the mantle compared to the future value of the 16 you traded? Can you answer that kind of quickly, Matthew?
Yeah, it's a good question. Number one, I can't predict the future, so I don't really try. So I was, I was trading vintage cards for vintage cards, so I kind of figured they're all probably going to go in the same direction, and I wasn't really going to sweat. I can't make that prediction, so I didn't try.
Good. Thank you for that. Mookie says, another thing consolidating allows you to do is realize the gains you've made in your previous purchases. Years of buying right, converting to big cards is so satisfying. It's a great point. I talked to Joe about it nightly, and some of the cards I'm giving up, I got into really well. And I bet you did too, Matthew. And that's a nice place to be. A good point, Mookie. Dan says, several of the cards I'm moving were really good buys that have appreciated more than most. It's a nice way to do it. It makes me think like all these years you've been parking money into cards. Let that appreciate just to get you towards the goal later on. Mookie says, buying a card twice should allow you to get better at it the second time. You're a subject expert already. That's a neat comment. And, you're studying it twice now. Southern Collector Tony says, our tastes and therefore our focus changes during our collecting journey. Sometimes you land what you consider your grail and then realize there might be a new challenge that is worthy. 100%. And Tita says, Jay Lee, you've made me appreciate registration on cards. I'm happy that I've had that influence or that impact because I think registration is worthy of our attention. And then Terry Brown says, Jay Lee, understand what you're saying, but that level of attachment is crazy. Call me crazy all you want, Terry Brown. I can live with that 100%. Okay. All right, guys, let's bring Josh. You're behind my camera, so I can't really see. There you are. Give me a thumbs up if he's ready to go. All right, guys, let's bring on Mr. Josh Adams, Midwest Vintage Cards, 90s Auctions. How are you, buddy?
Welcome I'm good. Back. How you guys doing? Joe, Matt, Jeremy, good to see you guys.
Good to see you. Good to see you. Now, you're no stranger to the world of consolidation yourself, Mr. Adams. Are you?
No.
Yeah, what do you want to say about it?
It's a lot of fun. I'm probably going to do it again tonight, and I'm running out of stuff to give Mark. So it's not bad because I just got to reload, and then you got to buy more cards. So money's for spending, and that's the way it goes. I did a pretty big consolidation at the National last year. A friend of mine had a essential credential Michael Jordan that he was looking to get rid of. And so like a week before the National, I was talking to him. We agreed on a price, and I went through all my cards to see if I could do it. And I could, but I kept like 10 that I really, really love. And we got the deal done at the National. Mark took possession of everything, and I sent him like probably 150, 200 cards. Like Jeremy said, like there were some $5 ones, $10 ones, and I sent him the hardest part was the 48 leaf set. That was the hardest part to let go of. It was like, ugh. But my thinking was you can always get those cards back. Like all you need is money and time. And like, which is weird because like the page used to not show up at all, like ever. And now there's like 3 or 4 like a month. So I figure I can just get it back, sooner or later. But the Jordan I don't think would come along anytime soon. And it's like from a great year, from a very memorable year. It's numbered to the number of wins they had to set the record. So, and it's a card I've always wanted. And I have the Frank Thomas from that year. So I've got like the 2 best players from the 90s and the 2 best sports. So two of the best sports, but yeah.
It's nice to pair things up like that. So just to be clear, you consolidated into a 1997 EX. Was it EX? What was the brand that the credentials came out of that year?
EX 2001, Michael Jordan, Essential
EX
Credentials.
2001 Essential Credentials Future. That's the pinkish red card numbered out of like 73 or 74. 72. Great. Yeah. 72. The Kobe's out of 73. The Shaq's out of 74. Yep. You got into that card, which is it's a tier 1 Jordan Grail. And what I find interesting, and Matthew and Joe, you guys might raise an eyebrow to this, but I think Josh explained it well. You got out of 48 leaf baseball. You got out of some high-end, highly desirable vintage baseball to get into a more I won't call it modern, but a 90s Jordan basketball card. And I'm not criticizing. I just think it's right. I think it's interesting and I respect it. But what do you want to say?
I mean, I wouldn't call it, I guess it is modern, right? Because like it was when I was like 20. So to me, that's a modern card. That leaf set's my favorite set of all time. I just love everything about that set. I love the poor registration on it. I love how it was made quickly to get gum out. I love that it's from Chicago. I just love everything about it. I love that they intentionally didn't put in a card or they skip numbered them to make it. I'm thinking of Gaudi's, but they skip numbered them. So when you're buying cards, like where's card 3? Where's card 7? You're thinking you got to buy more cards. Like we didn't put those out yet, So I mean, I love the whole history of the set of the company. I've already started, reloading on those cards because again, nothing against them. I think they're fantastic cards, but I bought 3 already. I bought 3 more already, so I'm already back on my way to getting that set done.
And now you're doing another consolidation. And you mentioned you're sending cards to Mark. That is Mark from Fund Your Cards, the same service I'm using. Which if anyone's interested, check them out. They're on the ticker right now, fundyourcards.com, and they will. What he's paying for the card that I'm buying, then I pay him back in cards, and he sells my cards to work down my debt. If I give him too many cards, he'll refund me, or he'll send me the cards back that he doesn't need to sell, or I can have credit with him and I can go bid on another card or have him bid on a card for me somewhere else. So that's so you're doing another one right now then, Josh.
I haven't checked my phone yet, but I want to see if I won something. I should know. It's 9:43, so I'm kind of I will wait until
there's big auctions. We have Heritage and Golden going off tonight.
Yeah.
Some big stuff. And good luck to everyone out there who might be bidding or selling cards in those auctions tonight.
Poured a stiff drink and bid away, So,
yeah. So we won't ask you what it is you're bidding on, but I obviously want to hear by the end of the night, if you don't mind. Matthew, I want to go back to you for a second. Are you, do you have your eye on anything tonight on Heritage or Golden?
I am watching a card on Heritage. I'm bidding on a card on Heritage. It's one that I'm trying to decide how much I want it, how hard to go for it. But there is a card I'm kind of chasing at the moment.
Go for it.
How about you, Joe? You got your eyes on anything?
No, unfortunately, I don't. But and I wish I did. I think I will in the years to come. But I'm in a personal down market, unfortunately. I wanted to mention one thing because I think it's going to be a sub theme tonight, which is when friends consolidate, they sometimes check in with friends. I support Fund Your Card and Mark and go do that. But there's also the opportunity, like Jeremy has me nipping at his heels about the Jerry Rice Red PMG. I know Hoj, who will be coming on later, I've managed to pry a couple cards out of his hands in critical moments, and it sounded like, Josh, you you came across an opportunity from a friend, and Matthew, you were just there at Burbank, and so you had Ash right there. You had that direct thing. But I think that is a component of this, is when people start to have their eyes on other things, sometimes friends are the conduit, or the kind of, they can be helpful bankers, or, lenders or buyers of cards that you need quick.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. Sure. And sorry, go on.
No, you go. Go ahead, John.
Well, the personal connections are really important, because sometimes cards will sell that don't come to, public auction, and people want to sell them kind of just not under the radar, but not, in the public eye. And sometimes that's good. It's hard to find cards. Matt, also I can say that mantle's killer. Fantastic. Congratulations. It's an awesome card.
Thanks so much. Yeah, one thing I wanted to say was that I think a distinction between what I did and what you two have done is like the timing, right? Like I had to do it at a show, so I was really like on the clock, which I probably didn't make the best decision. If I had more time, right, maybe I would have played my cards a little bit differently. Not to make too nasty of a pun, but then I also, if I would have had more time, I think I would have gone out to my friends for more, because actually some of the cards I traded to Ash ended up being purchased by my buddies, right? So we could have like saved some money, like if we had just been able to work it out. But I felt like, now that there are these services that exist that give you a little bit more time, I think that can definitely make that process a little easier, more efficient.
Yeah, and it's not just for the money or the sales or to save. That's a great bonus with our friends and our network in the hobby. The other thing, and this is it's got two sides to it, but is just asking for advice, getting opinions. With the Joe Jackson, I didn't want to let very many people know that I was targeting this thing, because I didn't want to, first of all, I didn't want to, attract any more attention to the card, which is tough when it's on Fanatics Collect anyway. And when Patrick Ryan, the consigner, is putting it on his very big Instagram account and making some good points about it. And I also, in case I wasn't successful, I didn't know that I wanted to let anybody know that I was even interested in it, because I might want to go after the next one, right? So, and then I also didn't want to discourage a friend who might also really want the card. So I didn't talk about it with very many people, but a couple people did know. But it's bouncing that off of as experienced as we may be, or think that we know what we know, there's still that sanity check where you might want to find out, am I crazy for doing this? Can I give up this many cards? And Joe is so good for me, because he had me thinking about all the different possible angles of it. And it's funny, but it worked out that everything that we talked about just made it more and more obvious that I had to go ahead and make this move for my collection. Now, I want to do a few more comments here, because there's one especially that I think is a great topic here. So first of all, let's take a look at Foul Ball. It says 59 Gibson was on my want list for a long time, but now I can't stop buying them. I own 4 of them. What's up, Jeremy? Welcome to the show. Iconic Al, Iconic Baseball, one of the great YouTube channel, great dude. What's up, Al? Iconic Baseball. David Chase says, I want to upgrade a few cards to my collection for better eye appeal, but I have a hard time selling until I have my new one. That's a bit of a leap of faith, because you don't know that you're going to find that new one. So good luck to you with that. David Marone, I picked up my beautiful auto Graham from David at the Toronto Expo a few years ago. Says, does anyone here collect full graded sets? He goes on, does anyone collect PSA graded complete sets? Rewarding. It's rewarding, but excessive. A smart person would only do the Hall of Famers rookie cards. Now, that's the comment that I wanted to pause on, guys, because in reverse consolidating my Jackie Robinson, I had to make a tough decision. And that decision was, and this is what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to spill the beans a little bit on some cards that I'm going to be sacrificing. I am breaking up my 1910 and 1911, my C56 and C55 hockey sets. Yeah, these are sets that I've had for a very long time. And like the first set, the 1910 C56 set, I've had that set complete, and I had it all graded myself in 08 by PSA. The C55 set with the Vezina rookie, not complete, 2/3 complete right now. But what I've decided is, and the PSA set registry is kind of like the reason why the people's love for that is the reason why I'm thinking to myself, listen, I'm good. So when I say I'm breaking up the set, I'm keeping the cards I love the most. I'm keeping the key players. I'm not giving up the Vezina, the Joe Malone, the Art Rosses, the Newsy Lalonde, the Cyclone Taylors, the Patrick Brothers. I'm keeping those cards, but the rest are going to go. And here's why I'm really comfortable doing it is because, number one, they're players I don't need as much. There's a stack of cards here, but I figure I will sell them into the PSA set registry. The grades are decent, so people will be able to upgrade their sets courtesy of my disposing of these cards. And I think that's a pretty, gratifying thing for me. I want these cards to go into some great collections, and the people that end up buying these cards, I want them to know I've owned them for this long. I had some graded myself. Here's where I got them from. I can share that information. So if anybody listening, watching is going to purchase, and we'll, I'll let you know where they are when they're listed. But if anyone purchasing any of those cards wants to reach out to me after and find out about them, I'll tell you everything I know about them. But I think that's one thing that I've had to sacrifice to keep my Jackie. Is a bunch of like either non-Hall of Famers or lower tier Hall of Famers.
Yeah.
Nice graded 120 or 115 year old cards. So that's a big sacrifice I'm making, but it's to keep Jackie and to pick up Joe Jackson. So I'll put that. Go ahead, Matthew. I see
One piece of advice I would give you in that front is I would definitely, if you don't already have those cards on the registry, you should add them. I did a similar thing. I had purchased a 1974 Laughlin set that I bought it raw, it came back graded. It graded very, very high. And then when all of the Negro League stuff got crazy last year, I added it to the registry, and then that basically enabled the people who were trying to upgrade their set to see my cards. And then, I had a lot of people reaching out to me to be like, hey, you're going to sell this card and stuff like that. So I would definitely advise you to do that if you haven't already done so.
Yeah, they are. My C56 set is like, I think it's the 11th one ranked or something like that. And my incomplete C55 set, they are on the PSA set registry. They've been there for years. I've had numerous people reach out to me over the past, 10 years. You get those emails once in a while. Hey, would you consider selling? I always think they're working for auction houses. I'm not sure. And they always send me offers that are just like not even 50% of what I'd consider and I'm not giving up my key Hall of Fame cards from those sets anyway. So, but yeah, appreciate the advice, Matthew. And thankfully they are on there. Josh, you got anything to say about any of that?
Yeah, I'd say don't get rid of that Jackie ever, because that card's awesome. And I used to have one. So every time I see it, I cry because I got rid of it like 8 years ago, so I don't want to talk about it.
Josh, I got an SGC Jackie 1 if you want to flip it for the Jordan credentials.
You're done. I'll come out to you tomorrow. Let's do it.
Is that a bookended one? You said, because you mentioned the number of wins, 72. Is it 72 of 72?
No, someone that we shall not name has that one. He's got 3 of them actually.
But it just happens to be 272 through the whims of fate of EX Future and now, and got it. And the Warriors, unfortunately, we beat the record, but we didn't win the chip that year, so it
doesn't count.
Ain't no thing without the ring.
All right, we'll do a few more comments, guys. Chris Hoge is in the back room. We're going to bring him on just momentarily, hear about his consolidation experience and get him to chime in on everything we talked about. But Joe Wood Collector Doug in the house. What's up, Doug? Welcome to the show. Tony, Southern Collector, says the difficult part when consolidating is your favorite, most expensive cards get you to the finish line fastest. And that was why I put this. Now, it's funny, Matthew, Josh, you talk about consolidating into your Essential Credentials Jordan. Well, coincidentally, the hardest card for me to give up is going to be my Essential Credentials Shaquille O'Neal. This is the hardest. This is the bit. I managed to salvage my Jerry Rice PMG red. I'm salvaging that one to Joe's dismay, perhaps, but that's the tough one for me to give up. But it's getting me there, and I've got other cards of him that I really like, and so I'm okay with it. But it's not. That's the tough one, Josh, and like it might be one that I'll never replace, but that's kind of where I'm at. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I think the trade-off is worth it when you actually think like weighing it. Like, you know, if it helps you get to that Cracker Jack, the chances of getting that Cracker Jack again are pretty tough. And like, yeah, like the Shaq stuff. You know, one guy's got like 8 of them. He always posts on Instagram. He's got like 8. He's got 8 Essential Credential Shaqs. As a separate topic about hoarding, but
yeah, about hoarding for sure.
Those cards are fantastic in hand. Essential Credentials. Here's my Frank. I brought him out. It's like it's an awesome card. I love it. So,
okay, I'm second guessing now. Stop. I got to do another reconsolidation here. Mookie Chilson says Jeremy is like a cardboard organ donor, giving up his PC so that set registries can thrive. I mean, it crossed my mind. I think I just want them. I want these cards that I've owned and loved for so long, to end up somewhere. It just end up in a collector who's going to really enjoy them, and that's it. I don't know why that is. It's just the way it is. Bob Boozle says Jeremy used to be a stage 5 card clinger. He is not anymore. No, I don't know what stage I was at, but I'm definitely moving down the run of stages for sure. So Mike Petty says, I moved assets to buy a card last week, checking to savings to wire transfer with the sacrifice. I have separation anxiety. I recommend buying after you've sold your cards or trade like Matthew 1956 Tops guy did. Sundin 564 serial number story. The Future Watch Ovechkin 107 recently sold. Ovi plus Ovechkin jersey numbers. That's a stretch, Sundin. That's a stretch. T-Dot says 48 Ted Williams Leaf is a thing of beauty. There's a PSA on Heritage 15K. I love that card, by the way. I think that's signed and slabbed card actually, and that's on my list as well, guys, of one to purchase down the road at some point. So, and I see Matthew in the chat while he's on screen. T-Dot, the Leaf Ted was on my trade block, and my buddies told me I was crazy, so I pulled it back. Yeah, that's right, Matthew. Go ahead, Joe.
Just before we move on too much further from your vintage hockey set, and I'm in foreign waters speaking about that, so I don't know how to name them properly. But I want to make sure that we honor that decision, because I know in talking with you, you talked about your identity as a collector in breaking that set up, and I'm glad you've gotten to the place where you are now, where you feel good about it. But some of the ways that we sorted out was that in breaking it up, you're keeping some core players that actually maybe will shine brighter in your possession. Yeah. You know, maybe that's a silver lining. Maybe that's a little mental gymnastics that makes the pain a little more bearable. But I do think that there is always, when you create space, you notice more what you have. And so whoever those big players are, Vezina, you mentioned a few others, these old hockey guys, I don't have any clue, but I'd like to think that you're going to enjoy those cards all the more in the absence of the semi-stars and commons that you're giving up.
Such a good point. I forgot that we had that particular line of discussion, Joe, and that's another benefit of all this. Exactly, is that I find that I keep those cards are all together in a graded card box from 1 to 36, the C56 set, the 1910, and the big cards, the bigger the top tier Hall of Famers among them get lost among the rest of them, and I find I don't enjoy them. I pull out that box, but I don't look at that row as much because I got to go through all the let's call them commons, to get to the more substantial names and players, to sit back and really look at it and enjoy players I know about. I know some of their history, where a lot of the others, I don't know anything about them. It's funny though, in going through and filtering them through, I started going to Wikipedia and Hockey Hall of Fame and reading about all these players to see if I was willing to give them up. And I got to the point where it's like, okay, so this guy is he's the first Australian hockey player credited with scoring the first breakaway goal or what. Like, there's all sorts of historical things, but I don't need to own those cards. I can read about them and now have the most influential pioneers of hockey representing that set and still being in my collection. So that's another benefit of cleaning or tightening up the collection and getting out of the set registry sort of. I also like to say that I'm not a prisoner or a slave to any checklist. I will, you give me the options, I will curate my own checklist from the published checklist,
right,
and make that, because I do that with all sorts of things now, all sorts of cards I collect. So I'm now just applying that approach to these very early sets. Now, we do have Chris Hoge in the back, and he's probably like, okay, it's time to bring me on, guys. I know he's very patient, so we will bring on Chris Hoge, guys. Chris, you good? 2 thumbs up. There he is. Welcome, Chris Hoge, back to the show. How are you?
Doing well. What's up, Jeremy, Joe, Matthew, and of course the great Josh Adams.
Mr. McGill, it's always a pleasure.
Good to see you. Welcome back every Saturday. Tonight, though, you're not coming in to close. You're coming in to be apart from the middle and forward, and I think it's great. So why don't we hear from you a bit, Chris? You've been listening, and you've done some consolidations yourself. One of your cards you consolidated into is on the thumbnail for this show, the Christian McCaffrey NFL Shield card, I believe. Why don't you share your experience, pre, during, and after, if you will?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I do have the card here on the desk. All right.
Hold on, there we go.
Very nice.
Okay. Really quick background for people who are transitioning from talking about Jackie Robinson and Mickey Mantle and Shoeless Joe to an ultra-modern active football player. McCaffrey is just one of the best fantasy players in the game today, and he actually holds the record right now for the highest career fantasy points per game in the PPR format for non-quarterbacks. So he's pretty good. That's why I collect them. He's really special in that regard. Okay, so the deal with this card is really straightforward, pretty similar to the stories that have been told so far today, which is that I consolidated about 100 pre-existing cards of various value in order to go after this card, which I won on a public auction maybe about 2.5 years ago. And so there's like a few topics that I was thinking about as you guys were talking. I actually have 3, and they all kind of tie in. So I think the one I want to throw at you guys first is this idea. It was inspired by Tony's comments when he mentioned that it can be really tempting to let go of your biggest, baddest cards first, essentially, because that gets you to the finish line the quickest. Your most valuable cards get you there the fastest. And so I kind of wanted to flip that. And from my experience, because I'm so hesitant, my biggest, baddest cards are absolutely the last ones to go. It's the smallest, least valuable ones that go first. And it got me thinking that, do you agree with this? Not in all cases, but generally speaking, consolidation expedites changes that are happening in your own collecting philosophy. Okay, here's what I mean by that. So how did I come up with 100 cards to consolidate into this McCaffrey in the first place? Where did they come from? What was I doing with them? And I developed a philosophy when I started collecting McCaffrey early on, which was I just want to get any one that he has, period. I don't care if it's rookie. I don't care if it's third year. I don't care if it's fifth year. I don't care if it's Prism. I don't care if it's Select. I don't care if it's Phoenix. I don't care if it's Chronicles. I just want them all. Base set, insert, doesn't matter. And after a while, I kind of got dissatisfied with that approach. I was really excited about it at first, and then I realized, number one, I'm going to run out of money if I try to buy every one of these that comes up for sale. So I'm never going to be able to complete this project, which is very frustrating. I need to narrow it, maybe to just a couple brands or something. I need to reduce the scope of this because I'm not going to be able to satisfyingly pursue this over the long haul. And then the other thing that happened too was just I'm not so excited about having these. Like, there's a lot of one-on-ones in Ultra Modern products. He has dozens and dozens of them come out for every season that he plays. It's just too much. So my collecting philosophy was changing over time. It was changing. And when this card came up that I needed to consolidate into, it expedited the change. It kicked me in the butt. It made me realize, yeah, you've changed your philosophy. You don't really want these off-brand one-of-ones from non-rookie seasons anymore. Let them go. And here is the catalyzing moment that's going to force me to let them go, which is I need to raise some money to buy a different card. So that's the topic I turn back to you, is what about the idea of a consolidation as a catalyzing moment that causes you to realize some of your collecting preferences and approaches have changed, and now it's time to act on it and recompose your collection?
I think it's a great scenario to present, Chris. Thank you for that. Because I mean, I think a lot of collectors, especially when you are moving into a new genre, you might just pick up a bunch of things willy-nilly. Maybe they don't fit together. They don't have a real firm spot in your collection. And by consolidating, you can clean that up. I mean, as long as I've been collecting, I have cards like that in my possession that I maybe can get rid of. And the other thing about that is that now I'm not going to be buying more cards like those ones. So I'm saving that expenditure. I'm narrowing my focus a little bit and being more picky moving forward. So yeah, not only are you converting cards that you bought that you might not love as much as you thought you were going to, but you're also going to probably save yourself from some irrational or unimportant purchases down the road, causing you really, I think it's like discipline. It's discipline and it's focus that it can steer you into. And Chris, when you opened and you said, instead of leading with your big cards, lead with your small cards, I'm telling you, I still have a couple of weeks before I need to pass these cards off to fund your cards. I'm going to try to reverse consolidate the Shaquille. I don't want to give this card up. I'm going to see if I can find other cards to get me there. So that whole thing about starting with your big cards, I think it's a great strategy. It gets for me, speaking from recent experience, it got the process going. It got me to build towards that target value. But then you start to work backwards again and say, okay, I'm going to pull this one out. What cards can go in? I don't know that I'll be able to, unconsolidate this card. What's the word? I don't know that I'll be able to get this card back. I might have to give it up. Or if I do, maybe I got to give up another big card like the Jerry Rice PMG that I don't want to. But, another thing I'm getting out of is my Gretzky run, my PSA 10 1980s Gretzky run, because they're really only valuable because of the condition. So I can get 9s if I want. And there's so many on the print. The print run is so high. So those are easier, but I'm certainly going to miss them, especially the 85. I'm going to highly miss that one, but it's another story. So thank you for that, Chris. Who wants to go next and kind of talk to what Chris is saying? And I'm going to see who's got their mouth open the widest right now. No, Josh.
So that is 100% accurate, what Chris just said, because, for a while I had, a lot of sets, and a lot of them were just like common dusty players that were taking up a lot of space. And I don't really care who the shortstop was in the 1933 New York Giants. I don't care. Doesn't matter. I'm more interested in the Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig and some other guys in that set, in the 33 Gaudies. 48 Leaf, you can find the Ruth, the Feller, the Williams any day of the week. Also, there's a lot of common guys there too I really don't care about. The hard part of that set is the short prints. So I love the short prints, but you can find those any day of the week also. So I was for a while thinking about, listen, I want to get rid of the stuff that you can really find anytime and focus on stuff that's really hard and rare, that doesn't come up that often, that you have to dig through and maybe only find through private sales, or maybe they come up at auction once a year. And that's what I was, kind of leaning towards. And then this opportunity came last summer, and I'm like, yeah, this is it. Let's do it. And I was thinking about it for a couple of days, talking to some people, you better do this. You're stupid if you don't. And I'm still stupid, but I did it. And I'm happy that I did. And he's right. I had a ton of Frank Thomas cards, like a ton of 90s Frank Thomas cards, but like upper deck out of 50, like, okay, whatever. Like I'll keep the PMGs because they're cool, like keep Big Hurt's PMG. He's the man, so like, and those are awesome. And then, get rid of the other tops out of 50. Who cares, So, that's that. But I can identify with what Chris said very, very strongly.
Matthew, what about you?
Yeah, I was gonna say that like at the beginning of the show we were talking about like this is really like this is an opportunity to like implement some strategic decisions, right? I think it's all about there's kind of the cards that are kind of the fluff, like you maybe created a lot of entropy because you bought a lot of random stuff, and that's some fraction of cards you can move. But then I feel like at least in my case, it was really like it was this refinement of taste and this kind of choice in the strategic direction of my collection that like was really, aside from getting an awesome card out of the consolidation experience, was the most valuable piece of it, is kind of really narrowing that focus of like what you want your collection to be. And this is such a unique opportunity to kind of, as you said, like kind of catalyze your momentum and actually executing that vision. Oh,
Can you
Okay.
lose Jeremy?
lost Jeremy.
There he
Oh, there
is.
he is.
It's not me.
No, that's Jeremy this time. He can't even pay his Wi-Fi now. That card costs so much money.
I like
All right, talk amongst ourselves until he gets back.
I'd like to weigh in real quick, and I agree. I mean, what Hoj said makes perfect sense. I want to maybe also throw in a wrench or consideration that's specific to modern cards as opposed to vintage cards, and that is, firstly, there are many instances, and not that I'm hunting these one-of-one whales that Hoj is after, but I've heard him talk about it, and I've followed various people who have the same. Oh goodness, am I out?
No, you're good. You're
Okay.
good.
It's the situation where it exists, but you haven't seen it before. Like it maybe has never come up for auction. And so I suppose the corollary would be the kind of condition, say, that Jeremy found his 1914 Cracker Jack in doesn't come around very often, on top of the fact that it's an extremely scarce card. So, but really, truly, and I know this from talking to Hoj now and then, is just when that McCaffrey came up, it may be the one opportunity he ever has to get that card. And so there is a higher level of pressure to make that move. And I just put that out there because I think a lot of times in my own mind, because I collect ultra modern and vintage, I go back and forth and kind of consider, compare and contrast what's different, what's similar. The other thing that also kind of emerged when Hoj was doing this, because ultra modern by its nature, the players are still playing, you also have to think about your overall portfolio value. So I know when he was getting out of, when he was trying to consolidate for the McCaffrey, he was moving a lot of McCaffrey, knowing that whatever happened in the transaction, he was going to be heavy on McCaffrey after getting the Shield 1/1 rookie, the McCaffrey card. So, getting rid of some McCaffrey along the way kind of made sense because these players are still active, and God forbid any 49er gets injured, much less the best player on the team. But I saw him at work in that way. And I think it's similar like with Jokic too. As much as you love a player, you need to be mindful of how you're sort of, what you're moving out is probably going to be connected to what you're moving in, maybe a little more than it would be like, oh, I want the 48, Leaf Jackie, so I'm going to trade the 49 Bowman Jackie. Well, no, I want both Jackies, and Jackie's Jackie, and Jackie's not going nowhere.
Yeah. Thank you for covering for me there, Joe. Another way to look at the cards we're getting out of is that they served a purpose. They served a purpose in many ways. Number one, we enjoyed them for the time we owned them. If you owned them, and however long that's up to you. In my case, these old hockey cards, I've owned them for 15 years. So that's even I guess it's 18 years now. That's a long time to own these cards. I have enjoyed them, and they helped. They were the foundation of building up the later year Hall of Fame collection that I built up. They were even the foundation for my baseball, football, basketball, vintage Hall of Fame collection. And so they serve that purpose. And now they serve the purpose of helping me evolve as a collector and helping my collection evolve by getting into something new. With Matthew, you gave up 16 great cards, and they serve their purpose, but it's a little bit different because now you're going back, you're trying to replace a bunch of them. The cards I'm giving up, I don't know if I'm going to try to replace any of them. I'll have to go through and see. Like I said, there's over 300. We will see, but I'm trying to give up cards that I'm not going to want to replace.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I paused because I think about that. When I moved out a big chunk of my collection a couple of years ago, I thought I'd replace a bunch of those cards, and I haven't. And I don't even really, I don't own a Jim Brown anymore. I wouldn't mind grabbing a Jim Brown again. There's maybe one or two out of the several I moved, but I wonder, I want to dive into that a bit more. Like Chris, to you're getting out of a bunch of McCaffrey cards. Some are one of ones, which are not easy to get back, but do you think you will ever covet them again? Is there any regret at all? Not regret, not because you got a great card, not regret, but do you miss them at all? And do you think you'll ever, because you probably know where some of them are, you think you'll ever try and get any of those back?
Yeah, one of the ones that I regret moving the most, I think by far the most, was McCaffrey's 2016 Select XRC Black 1 of 1. And I have contacted the guy that I sold it to try and buy it back. And he's a 49ers guy, so he was like, yeah, maybe at the end of his career, hit me up then and I'll be ready to let it go. So I will. A couple of years will go by and I will hit him up and see if I can do that. But the other part of my answer to this question is that I try to be really intentional about this topic. When I move on from a card, specifically in the scenario where I know it's going to be difficult, if not impossible, to bring it back into my collection, either for portfolio balancing reasons, which I like when Joe pointed that out, that's a great point, or just because I think it might disappear into the abyss of some collection and not surface again. When I know that those factors are in play, I really try to work up the will to hate the card and to not like it anymore. I really try to convince myself to disdain what you cannot have, I think is the way it's put. So I do try to really get into that state of mind. And like, once it's gone, I hate it and I don't want to think about it or see it anymore.
Interesting. Once it's gone, I hate it. And I know you don't necessarily mean that, but there's a comment from Skeppy right here. He says, it's funny when you decide to let go of something, there is an immediate need to express rationalizing the decision with others. What was once loved and had purpose, and this is the key sentence, what was once loved and had purpose gets kicked aside quickly, right? I mean, there's some truth to that, because I think it's just, these are the mental exercises that we go through to rationalize these moves, and so that we can really find ourselves moving on from some cards that we own for a long time. And I find myself doing exactly what Skeppy is saying, is trying to find reasons, talking to others about them, to get myself more comfortable with what I have to do. And this is now I'm at a point where I have to do this. I've committed to this big Joe Jackson card. I'm strapped. I have to move cards out. I can't go back on that now. So it is a tough process, but I'm no regrets, and we'll see if I miss any of these cards, 6, 8, 10 weeks from now, months and years as well. So Josh, you got something to jump in with?
You won't miss them. Trust me, you won't miss them. You'll be very happy with your new card. I thought I'd feel the same way. I had a hard time getting rid of that 48 leaf page because I don't know when I'll get it back. I mean, I will. People are always breaking the law, so I'll be fine. But I mean, it's just hard. It'll be hard to get it back, but you can. I won't be able to find that MJ anytime soon, without jumping through hoops.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
All
I'm
right.
happy. I don't miss any of those. I want to get them back. I'll tell you, I missed the Jackie more than anything because of when I sold it, and I didn't have, and I kicked myself. The Page is the best card in that set. I think it's the best looking card, but that's a whole other topic. And whatever. You won't miss the cards. Trust me.
I would have missed the Jackie, and that, it was really tough for me to put it in the pile. And when I realized I could get it out, but I would have to sacrifice something really important, but less important to me. And I like this. I like tightening up the collection without giving up the key cards in it. Like, I am giving up some key cards, don't get me wrong, but I like after I committed to buying the Joe Jackson, I went through a bit of panic. Like, I could not sleep that night. Part of me was like, oh my God, I did it. Oh my God, look what I had to pay for it. And then, oh my God, what did I do? What have I done? Like, one of the first questions I asked myself was, did I just make a huge mistake? Not because of the price or anything, because of what I have to give up. And Joe will remember, because we were talking right after, and I was somewhat distraught. And luckily I got out of it when I put pen to paper and started going through and making these piles and realized that, okay, this isn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. And it's not great, but it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. So it, being forced into it maybe pushed me over the edge. If I would have, before I would have bid on the card, and this is something to consider if you're looking at this, and this is maybe the worst advice, but it would have worked for me. I'm glad I didn't start the process looking at my existing collection and trying to come up with $150,000 worth of cards to give up, because I might never have pulled the trigger.
Never
You
would
would
have
have
done
talked yourself out of it.
Right?
Yeah.
Right, exactly. By taking the aggressive path, I forced myself to make tough decisions. And I'm right now, as I sit today, very happy with the overall process, the moves I've made, and the decisions that I've made on which cards to give up. So that, I don't know if that's good advice or bad advice. Should you start just buy the big card and then figure out, especially if you're not putting money in, right? If you're not putting money in, you know,
who cares then? Just do it. Exactly.
just do it.
Yeah. Just, and also it's just money. Whatever. You can always get more. Just do it and move on from that and worry about it later.
I don't know. I think that you gotta, my perspective on this is that you probably have to have a pretty good mental model for covering at least 25 to 50%, and then you're like, okay, I think I can get there with the extra layers of thinking. At least that's how I thought about it. One thing that I thought of when you said that, Jeremy, was this question of how do you eat an elephant, and the answer is one bite at a time. Right? It's exactly the same thing.
Yep, for sure.
Exactly. Chris?
Can I jump in on the how to eat an elephant?
Yeah.
Okay.
Why, do you have experience with this? Or
Let me bring a little experience to this topic of eating elephants.
I can speak to this. Go ahead.
It reminds me of like an important decision that kind of gets made at the outset of starting a collection, or even at the beginning of collecting in general, is, will I move very slowly and wait for only the cards that I really want, and I'll just keep this cash reserve on the side, and then when the card that I really want shows up, then I'll dip into it and I'll go eat the elephant all in one meal. I'll go buy it and I'll just get it, and I just have to be patient and wait for it to show up. And that's an approach, but I don't think that's how most of us collect. Just not just the five of us on the stage. I mean, everybody in the hobby. I think the way that most of us collect is that we love the action, even if it's getting a mail day for a $2 card this week, and then, a $10 card next week. We just accumulate and we accumulate. And if, sometimes when you do that, that means you deplete your cash reserve, and you don't necessarily have the funds on hand to be able to strike immediately when your white whale shows up. But here's the trade-off. The trade-off is that, you have to scramble and sell stuff and raise money, or, now we're in an era where you have fund your cards, which makes it just infinitely easier from a logistical point of view. But if you've been accumulating cards over time, if you've been eating your elephant one piece at a time, so to speak, you're building up this equity that can balloon into something larger than you would think it could become at the outset. So if I'm just adding, $100 card a month and I do that for a few years, all of a sudden I've got $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 worth of equity in cards that, I probably wouldn't be disciplined enough to save $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 in cash and never do anything with it. But all of a sudden I've got this equity in my collection I've built up. And then when that card comes up, all of a sudden, I don't really have to look into my savings account to figure out how I can afford it. I can look at my collection. I can say, man, I had a great time accumulating all these cards. I've got this amazing cluster of cards, but there's one now that I really, really want. And I'm going to be able to use this collection I built, and I had a great time building. I'm going to be able to use that to get the big card that I want. And so there's something like it's like double dipping. It's like you get to enjoy all the activity and the fun and the pleasure of collecting the cards along the way. Like you don't have to be disciplined and say I'm not going to buy anything until my white whale shows up and then I'll buy it. You get to have your cake and eat it too. You get to collect and have fun along the way. And then when the time comes and you decide, hey, I'd like to consolidate into this card that I've always dreamt of, then you get to go for it.
Right.
It's a savings mechanism in a way, but it's fun. You're not just putting money in the bank and looking at a number. You get to enjoy the cards. Stukes makes a great comment here. He says, every card I bought or sold has got me to the place I'm at today. It's a hobby. It's been fun, part of the joy of the hobby process. Yeah, well said, Stukes. Josh, were you going to jump in with something?
No, I just agree with that. Every card you buy, it's a hobby and it's fun. And part of the fun is buying cards you like, and then you find one that you can sell like year 6 to get one that you've always wanted, and then just kind of repeat the process again. That's what I'm doing. I'm repeating the process again and again. That's kind of part of what collecting is. It's the method, it's the plan, it's what you want to collect, it's the focus, and it is like the fun of getting that card in the mail and you finally have it and you can do what you want with it, stick it in a box or look at it. I never get tired of looking at these things. So
right.
It's cathartic and it's relaxing.
Let's continue around the horn. Just get comments. Matthew, what have you been thinking as you've been listening for the last few minutes?
Some of the things I've been thinking about were, a big piece of this, at least for me, is this concept of like how big is too big of a collection, right? Like we talk about this whole thing of like, I've added a bunch of cards and now they're kind of just like, I don't really, maybe they're not serving the need anymore and maybe I can just move them. And at least for me, like my collecting it's not like I'm super disciplined, but it just stresses me out to have just like a bunch of rando like cards around. So I really try to like keep it like pretty tightly pruned. And I guess like the one bite at a time kind of thing, at least for me, is more of like, this process that Jeremy was going through of like, oh my God, I have like this huge number to try to come up with. How do I do that? And the way that you do that is you take a spreadsheet and, you just attack it, right? You just attack the problem. And so at least those are some of the quick things that were kind of coming into my mind. And I guess going back to the first point about, how many cards is too many, at least my current mental model is I like to be able to like recall all of my cards kind of without prompt. And like kind of as a sign of like, do I know the cards I have? And if there's a card I like just discover one day in my collection, be like, oh, I didn't know I had that. That probably means I should let it go because it's like I'm not holding it in RAM, so like it's probably not that important to me.
What number is that, Matthew?
For me, it's like around like 350 or something like that, like unique cards.
It's a good memory. Yeah.
You mentioned the whole spreadsheeting process, and I have to shout out Chris and Card Ladder for that, because in going through my cards, I needed to come up with value. So I was every card went through the Card Ladder sales history to see, for me to get to that number. And I want to give one more piece of advice to people who might be doing this. And it's just the way I approach it was I was very conservative with my value estimations, because you never know. Comps are only as good as they were on those days, really, right? They're one data point. So I was very conservative in my spreadsheeting values, which I think gives me cushion, and also maybe also gives me credit with Mark at Fund Your Cards, so that I can maybe pick up another card for a few $1,000 or whatever down the road. If it depends how far over I go. Joe just showed his card very discreetly, which reminds me, I don't think we heard from you, Joe, about your consolidating process into your Steph Curry card, which, by the way, I love your Steph Curry card. So why don't you tell us your experience?
Well, it's a good segue from what Hoj was saying about, bites of the elephant, but it's a little less deliberate or methodical. I've been a PWC into Fanatics sort of Sunday night auction bidder for many years now, and over the time, I buy on eBay, I buy at shows, I buy privately, but it's a little ritual I have on Sundays just to see what's happening, and not unlike many, I'm sure there's occasions where I've made mistakes. And over 2-3 years, the mistakes add up. And so in conjunction with that, and talking with Hoj, and just assessing my own portfolio and thinking about the importance of the Golden State Warriors to my life, to my childhood, and to my current realities, having attended a massive amount of games from 2015 to 2020, I felt like I needed a big Curry card. But big Curry cards are really big, so, and I never liked the rookies. I never liked the tops, be it chrome or refractor. I mean, sure, I would love one, but even back in the, pre-COVID eras, I just wasn't comfortable with the prices they were fetching, because the cards didn't stimulate my collecting gene very much. So anyway, I made the decision to trim the fat in my PWC or Fanatics Collect vault, not with a specific card in mind, but knowing that invariably they put up some cards on their Sunday auctions that might be in a moment something I wanted to strike for. So I managed to just really not cause myself a whole lot of pain directly, because none of these were all I would deem either mistakes or things that were covered in other areas of my collection. And I generated a piggy bank, that when this Curry card came along, I don't know if you have the image, but it's an immaculate collection, platinum, 1 of 1. And you'll see here, this is the town jersey. This is the Oakland, rooted in Oakland. So this card had a lot of personal meaning for me, being an Oakland native, Berkeley native, right there on the border. And when this card came up, and you'll notice it's authentic. It's not even a graded card. So there's probably something, I don't have it in possession. It's up there in Tigard, Oregon, if anyone knows where that is. I think some of you might know. And yeah, when this card came up, I went full hog into it, just because I knew it was the right weight class for me getting into a card. And I had done the elephant eating in advance, where I was able to pounce like a tiger, and I got
Cobra,
like
says Craig.
And absolutely no regrets. And it's I like the Immaculate brand. Obviously Curry is Curry, and it's right on the cusp of their 2 back-to-back titles. A lot of people think about Kevin Durant, but I think as time marches on, they'll think more and more about the chef. And I just really love the patch as well, because it is connected to this thing that is rooted in Oakland. So anyway, that's my 1 of 1 consolidation. It was more of a luck into or backward process that just happened to work out in a fantastic way.
So you kind of pre-prepared for something that you didn't know you were going to prepare for. The right card came up, and you were able then to pounce. I think that's another thing that we can. If we have the ammo, we can be doing that as well. Should you want, it's really just building up a war chest to be able to go after the card, whether it's money in the bank, money in the Fanatics Collect vault, or wherever your PayPal, whatever it is. It's a similar thing, but you wanted to make sure you had those cards sold at the ready in time. And It's another way to.
One last caveat. I think most of your cards are in the 6-figure class. I don't think this isn't even in the 5-figure class, but it's meaningful to me, right? And I'm sure you guys have cards of lesser value than a Jordan Credentials, a 52 Mantle, or a Cracker Jack that are meaningful to you as well. And that's kind of what it's about, right? Bringing in something that really makes you feel good about your collection and anchors your collection in some way that's specific to your collector identity.
100%. The value doesn't really matter. It's what the card means to you, to your collection. And I like how you put like anchoring the collection. It'd be like for Chris with that McCaffrey, that's the anchor of the McCaffrey collection. He's got a Jordan collection. He's got his Jokic collection, some Jordans. They're all anchored by one card, and then you add to it. I believe that's how you do it. Josh and his Jordan Credentials. I mean, that's the key 90s. He's got his vintage. He's got his 90s collect. That's his key 90s card. Matthew, vintage guy. He's got his main card, his 52 Topps Mantle. And now I've acquired the foundation of my vintage collection, which is like, it's such a cool thing to be able to do this far into collecting as well, decades in, and you can still do that. Josh, I want to go to you. If you have anything to say, number one, but number two, how are things going on Heritage right now for you?
Oh, it was golden. It looks like I won, so I was pretty happy.
Oh, on golden. You won so the card, because I know on golden they don't all end at the same time.
Right. So
what are you willing to share with us what you won?
It's in the chat. Ours. I didn't, not here. Our own one.
On Instagram.
Yeah.
Well, can you tell? Do you want to tell the audience here or what?
Not really. I'll keep it.
Okay. No, you don't have to. Okay, no problem. You don't have to.
Right. But thank you for asking.
Congratulations.
I like what Joe says. That it's cards that are important to you and meaningful to you. Like Frank Thomas cards are meaningful to me. I was there, like I saw him play like 100 times in the 90s. I love watching him hit a ton of home runs. My favorite player in the 90s. Jordan, obviously, my favorite player growing up in Chicago. So, and even the most expensive ones don't have to be the most important ones. There's, a 1990 Leaf Frank Thomas, my favorite card of all time. I love that card. I got 88 of them the last time I counted. So, every time I see one at a show, if it's raw, I'll just buy it. It's like $5. I got a ton of them. I keep buying them. So, which is probably an illness, but I enjoy it.
But you're not alone, Joe?
No.
Oh, I was just going to say how many of them are centered, but that's another conversation.
Yeah. Not many.
All right, let's do some comments. I got a bunch I want to get to here. So we're going to start. We're going back about half an hour, but still some great comments. Mike Petty says, Jeremy makes a great point. Make your own checklist. You don't need PSA to do it for you. And I'm not just talking about the PSA set registry. I'm talking about the Topps checklists, the Bowman checklists, the T206 checklist. We see people collecting like all these different, forming their own checklist from the master checklist. It doesn't not just the set registry, but any set, any insert, essential credential sets, whatever it is, 48 leaf. Maybe you just want a handful. I know for the 41 play balls, I have a 3-card checklist. I'm 1 down, 2 to go. We'll see how we go. Josh Zwald watching us all the way from Thailand. Greetings to Josh in Thailand. Mike Petty says, tough decision to break up that hockey set. Once you do, you won't miss it. It will go to another worthy collector and keep the gems from it. Joe is right, as per usual. Mookie Chilson says, when it's time to change, you've got to rearrange. Peter Brady, the Brady Bunch. Greg Midlife says, I feel like I'm on the couch at therapy. This discussion is so healthy for me. Dylan Double D, great discussion for sure. Welcome to the show, Dylan. Stuke says, my collection is in the state of entropy. Maybe primed for a consolidation, Dan. Maybe Strongsville will deliver for you. Steve Splenda says to Hoj, sounds like a Greek philosopher when he breaks down the epistemological roots of his. I butchered that sort of. I don't. Sorry for butchering that word. I don't know how to say it. Breaking down the epistemological roots of his collecting habits. Junk Wax Museum moving to the next tier of collecting, which is interesting when you do. As we do evolve through this hobby and through collecting. Bob Boozle says, calling Bobby Jr. into the room to help me understand Hoj's big words. Foul Ball says it's easier to find stars over commons. That's because they are more worthy of showcase space, more worthy of grading. So yes, 100% agree. It is easier to find stars over commons. Savoy Special says at the last stage of collecting from here, it's getting passed down or selling. Mookie says Jeremy's hockey cards Jeremy's hockey cards walked so his Cracker Jack shoeless Joe could run. Savoy says been down that road, letting something go only to want it back later. Right. Kinger says the Cracker Jack would not have a milestone feel without the feel of losing something substantial. That is why your card journey is special. That's a neat comment because it's kind of true, right? It's like there's no pleasure without pain, right? There's no dark without light. There is no Cracker Jack, Joe Jackson without a Shaq and some old hockey cards. So Kinger, really great point there.
Yeah,
Someone go ahead, Matthew.
Really fast. I actually think this is an important thing that distinguishes like how we identify with people as collectors is the fact that like you can't just like take money and go buy this Joe Jackson. Like you've got to go through this process, this kind of like painful roller coaster of figuring out what to move. And I feel like that, at least for me, that's a big identifier of, okay, that person's like, they're in this hobby for real, right? It's not just like, I'm just dumping money into it.
Right on.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. Let me continue with some more comments. Yankees fan says, I'm glad you can move on, JL. I've sold before, and it seems I always want them back. Separation anxiety issues. There's risk of that for sure. D Nugs, welcome to the show. No better late than never. Mike Petty says, Josh is right about that. It's only money. Just make more. Savoy Special, welcome to the show, says, strike hard, strike first, no mercy. That's kind of how I feel about the Joe Jackson. I found a way to win it. Yit's in the house shouting out his buddies, Josh and Chris. Foul Ball says, collect how you like, but I would rather hoard collect. I will just buy the card I want since I have a job and a savings account. That's fair. I mean, hey, exactly. Collect how you like. It's right. Boo Boo Goo Boo says, I love this show. Well, welcome to the show, Boo 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 Goo. And Robert Scott moved my 60s mantle run last fall to pick up my Ruth 144, which I saw shortly after he got it, I believe. Content with the decision, not missing them as much as I thought I would. That last sentence is, to me, that's going to, that's important. Not missing them as much as I thought I would. That's great to hear, Robert. And Boo 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 Goo says, this is the best sports card show I've ever seen. Well, we'll take that here on Sports Cards Live, Mr. Boo 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 Goo. All right. Who's got something? Who's got something for us? Go ahead, Chris.
I've got something. How'd you know? You saw my mouse hand hovering? Yeah. Okay. Here's the one other thing that I came in with, my last one. And it came to me from something that Josh said right before I joined, which was hoarding. The idea of hoarding cards and like hoarding copies of cards. And then I connected it to the idea of consolidating, with the idea being that consolidation discourages hoarding. And so like, let me frame what I'm about to say with this part first. So, Josh and I do the crossover, and there's been a couple times during the crossover where I've like shown a mail day and Josh will be like, don't you already have one of those? I'm like, yeah, it's like my second copy or my third copy. And Josh is like, why do you have multiple copies? You're just blocking a different collector from being able to get that card. Why do you need more? You should have one and then let other people have a chance to get these cards too, which is a very fair point. Now, the flip side of the coin is that it's a free market. I can acquire more if I want to acquire more, and so can anybody else. But I also thought that he made a really good argument. And I did happen to see the reasoning behind it, and that if everybody sort of followed that approach, it might be easier for some of us as collectors to get cards that we really need. Okay, so then how does consolidation, how does that block hoarding? Well, I'll tell you how it did for me. So when I was consolidating into the McCaffrey NT Shield autograph, by that point in time, I had acquired 4 of the 10 McCaffrey Prism Gold cards from his rookie year. And here I am. I'm sitting on 4 of them, and like I wanted to try and get all 10. Not that would have been doable, but that was kind of like the goal. And consolidation made me completely forget about that. And it made my priorities shift. And it made me realize, yeah, you're doing this thing with these 4 copies, but you don't really want 4. I mean, at most you want 1. And then you want to have if something that you really want comes along, you want those extra resources available to be able to go get it. So that's the idea I want to inject into this first of all, do you have an opinion on hoarding, good or bad or indifferent? And then second of all, does consolidation discourage hoarding, which is for the benefit of collectors as a whole?
Well, let's go around the horn. Who wants to take it first? Matthew, I see you nodding. Maybe you want to kick us off.
Yeah, I'll take a crack at it. First comment would be that I think that dupes are important from the point of view of a trade bait perspective, in the sense that sometimes you need something like that to unlock a card where money doesn't get you the card. You need to be able to move something that is pretty rare, or something that's super valuable. So at least in my experience, that's been pretty key. My second thing would be as someone who just gets nervous about having too many cards, I'm definitely someone maybe overly concerned with moving on the hoarder side of the spectrum. So those are my 2 thoughts.
Thanks, Matthew. Let's keep on going around. Joe, what do you think?
I'm a dupe, sometimes even a trip. I've got a thing for Sport Kings. I've got 3 Duke Kahanamakus, and I've got 2 Jim Thorpes. I won't keep all of them to the grave. And so what they do is they allow me within that little segment to kind of assess which one has the most value to me relative to what I could get for it in a trade, or, in some kind of, sales. So in terms of the discouragement of consolidation, or moving into a bigger card, I don't know. I think by nature, when I really love a card, I like owning more than one. It's weird. I think I'm a little bit of an outlier there, but another card that I have multiples of is the T206 Walter Johnson portrait, and they're all beaters. So I have a goal in that situation of wanting to get rid of. I would trade all of them. I have 3 beaters. 2 of them are authentic, and one is a 1.5, I think. And I don't like the look of any of them particularly, other than I love the card itself. But I'd like to get. There you go. That's the one. But I'd like to get rid of all 3 of those and go into one card. So for me, it's very idiosyncratic to the specific issues that I have in hand, and what I want to do with the bigger picture of moving into a particular card. Matthew makes a great point. Sometimes it's just great to have trade bait that doesn't hurt you at a visceral level because you already got it covered.
Joe, are those Johnsons all the same backs, or are they different backs?
Are the Johnsons? I think they're all sweet caparals. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Maybe there's a different factory in there or something, but
Okay, I was curious.
yeah, that's a good question for the astute TO6 collector.
Dusty forever, man. Yeah.
Dusty dust. I love referring to vintage as dust. I love some good dust. So on the topic of hoarding, I've hoarded before, whether it's going for a complete set of rarish cards and buying extras to have as trade bait down the road, or player collecting. And I hoarded a lot of cards of one player in particular. And now, as I go through a couple of rounds of whittling down the collection for 2 very different, but very important reasons, I find that I'm not necessarily needing to own such a hoard anymore, and I'm willing to let go. And each time I do, I'm willing to go deeper into that hoard to let go of those cards, because how many autographs of the same player do I really need? That's another question. Unless you are, this is just a question. I was about to phrase it in a tone that was going to sound like a loaded question, but it's not loaded. How many autographs of the same player on cards that you pull out of packs, or cards that came out of packs, so not IP autos, how many autographs of those players do you covet, want, or desire in your collection? because I have probably of this one player, I probably had 150 pack pulled, maybe 200 pack pulled autographs. I don't know that I need that many, especially when I have 13 of the same card here of the 50 produced and 5 of the 10 of that card. Do I really need that many autographs of the same player in my collection? I mean, I'll get you in Matthew. I love Matthew's visceral response there. We'll get you in a sec, but I've decided I don't need 150 or 200. I'm probably good with 50, which is still a huge number, but I'll over time get myself down even further, I think. But really, how many? It speaks to hoarding, it speaks to collecting, it speaks to using them to consolidate down the road, selling for cash, whatever. So let's go around the horn that way, and we'll start with you, Matthew, because I can tell you're itching there to get something in. But please, what are your thoughts on that autograph question?
Yeah, I think I would frame my answer kind of the same way I talked about it before, which is like the idea of like how big of a collection do you want and what sets that boundary. And so like the way I would answer your question directly, it would be like, how many different like mental images of that player's signature and card are you able to hold in your head? When you think of that guy, do you think of this one card? Do you think of 5 cards? Do you think of 50? And I would use that number to say, well, that's how many you should have.
Yeah. Josh or Joe, go ahead.
As you were saying that, I had the recollection of our friend Eric Myers. I think most of you are probably at least aware of who Eric is, who has, I believe, 4, if not 5, Babe Ruth sweet spot autograph balls. Single sign. That's neither here nor there. Obviously, Eric appreciates those both aesthetically and as the great investments that they are. For me, yeah, Jay, I'm with you, man. I kind of had to clear out, like I had the good fortune to buy some Kobe autographs before he passed. And I think I ended up, liquidating maybe 3 to 4 of them, but I still have 3 or 4, depending on the card, if it's, an IP versus, a card that was made into.
You might have just had a Joe issue that might be. Joe, try again.
Sorry. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I think on the modern cards with the IP, if it's an aesthetically appealing one, I can hold them, as Matthew said, as images in my own mind. I think I love that framework. But yeah, I don't need to have that many. I've gotten rid of some Stephs, some Kobe's, even some LeBrons. I would like to get an MJ autograph at some point. I don't have that.
Right on. So to the autograph question, then we've heard from Matthew, Joe, Joshua Adams.
So I guess like in terms of how many autographs you need, I think it depends on the player and the sets. Like I immediately think of Michael Jordan, and he's got so many different, autographs. There's playing days autograph, and there's a ton of non-playing days autographs. For Frank Thomas, there's a few playing days autographs, but like, I don't know. For me, I never was a big autograph guy. So I'm not maybe the best person to answer this question, but I think Matt got a very reasonable and logical answer. Is how many can you mentally hold in your head? Like, yeah, I remember I have this card. Like, I forgot I had a couple cards. I'm like, oh, I have this. I'm like, must not be that important to me. They're out, So if that answers the question.
Yeah, I like that aspect, that angle is how many can you hold in your head, and it depends if it's the same card over and over again. Yeah, I mean, you're just keeping them from other collectors at that point. Like people who want all. I don't want to judge any approach to collecting really, but I'm not a big fan of there's 10. There's a print run of 10 of these autograph cards. They're all autographed in some set. Maybe it's a 50 card set. There's going to be some people trying to complete that set, and one guy trying to get all 10 of that one card. It's now going to stop the set collector from getting that whole set. I don't love that approach. I'm going up against that with a card that a set I'm collecting from 2008. There's 10 cards. There's 10 copies of each card. They're patch cards. and one guy's trying to get all the Phil Espositos. He's got 9. He's got 9 of them, and I need only one. And I hope I can get it before he does, but I probably won't. And if I don't, I'll be okay. I'll live. But I mean, I don't love that approach. It's like Chris was talking about what Josh said to him, Josh Johnson said to him, and I agree with that approach. Josh Adams, you want to jump back in?
I'm saying if you're doing sets, you should do the Cracker Jack set now. You already have like the hardest card in the set. So all you need now is like the Mathewson and the Cobb, and you're like halfway there. So that's what I am voting for. And that's not hoarding. So there you go.
Chris, let's go to you on all this autograph talk.
Well, I wanted to ask you, Jeremy, why what was the reason behind clarifying the pack pulled auto, and like is 150 pack pulled autos versus would it be different if they were 150 IP autos?
No, I think I was really distinguishing between like modern day pack pulled autos and like the recent, uptick craze towards Hall of Fame in-person vintage autographs where, those can serve those are, number one, you would be holding them back perhaps from other collectors, but they're also, I think a lot of people consider to be big investment opportunities. So I can understand why somebody might want to get as many, autograph, whatever, Satchel Pages or Ty Cobbs or Jackies or Micks or Hanks or whatever. Great question. I don't know exactly. I think that's kind of where my head was at, but I don't have any better reason than that. I was really trying to separate modern from vintage. So,
yeah, that makes sense.
Oh, sorry. I remember a bit more, Chris. It was also because of in-person autographs. You have that experience of getting the card autograph with the player yourself. So you might have gone to see Mickey Mantle at 3 different card shows and gotten 3 different cards autographed. So that was the main reason I made that distinction. Sorry to interrupt you.
No. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'll just say something. I'll use this question as the vessel to say something positive about volume, because almost all the comments that I've made tonight have been more geared in the direction of minimalism or small quantities. And, there certainly is something satisfying about a giant collection with a wide variety of cards. And I think if they're all autographed and they're all pack pulled autographs, granted, we know about the glut of supply that has been plaguing product manufacturing for, I don't know, a few decades now at least. But even still, there's something cool about having a variety of a lot of different cards and just having a big quantity of them. I do think there's something really cool about that. There's something to be proud of, and having gone through the experience of acquiring all of them. Sort of each card brings its own experience, and so that collector has maybe more experiences in the palm of their hand when they rifle through their collection than somebody like myself with a smaller size collection. And then the fact that they're all autographed, I mean, sure, it was done in a mechanical fashion where like the cards are put on the table in front of the guy and he swipes through it, but it still makes it a little more interesting to have presumably 150 different cards from different products that were signed by this athlete, at least most of them or some of them at a different time. I'm just going to say that piece in defense of the large quantity.
Yeah, because there's still assortment within the large quantity. So, and even, if you are collecting a modern player who signs a lot, or a retired player who's in modern sets that signs a lot, we see a lot of that. There could be 5 different cards that come out each year in Upper Deck the Cup or whichever Topps or Panini sets for those players, and they're all different, and they all have different aesthetics and designs and foil accents and all these different things. So you might want to have many of that player's autographs. But where I got carried away was, yes, this player has 6 cards in the set, and I'm going to have 5 of this and 13 of that and 4 of these and 5 of these. And like, I don't need that many. And I am also making it harder for the people who are working on those sets to get them. So by, getting rid of them, letting them kind of make their way back into the hobby somewhat, slowly. You don't want to just throw them all out there at once. That's probably just going to hurt you and devalue them all. So you want to do it a little bit slower. to let them out, and now you're doing two things. You're whittling down your collection, you're gaining more focus, and you're helping out other collectors. And I mean, that's just a really nice bonus to be able to do that, to help out other collectors, especially with cards that you love and you know, or at least you hope that are going to go into a great home yet again. So yeah.
I'm glad you said that, Chris, because all night I've been thinking about the sort of dichotomy between how Matthew got his 52 and how Jay Lee got his Cracker Jack. And I've been wanting to make sure that Matthew knows that I'm sure those 16 cards that you gave up, they were all bangers. And some of them probably hurt more than, you know, the 350 cards that Jay Lee's giving up. But what you also preserved probably were parts of your collection that may not have been as high value, but that if you had a month or 3 weeks, you might have moved. And I think it's just as likely that you could feel pain for cards that are in the $20 to $100 range that are meaningful to you that you might have quickly pulled out than, you know, whatever it ended up being of those 16 really, I'm sure, not easy to part with cards as well. So yeah, I hear you on that, Hoj. And there's also, I mean, it also speaks to the mechanism by which you're making the transaction. Jay Lee is lucky to have Mark at Fund Your Cards doing the schlepping, the hard labor. All he needs to do is get the cards to Mark, and then the rest is history. That it becomes a little onerous to liquidate if you're in a consolidation moment. You know, cards that are in the, you know, for me, I almost have a rule on eBay. Like, I don't sell anything under $25 on eBay because it's just not worth my time personally at this point. Maybe it will at some point. But anyway, just some thoughts on that.
Appreciate it. And Matthew, Josh, anything to say on these topics before we go to comments again? And just a quick update. So Ben Hosler from Rolling Insights, he's a great guy. He's newer to the hobby. He's been joining us. This will be his 4th time on the show tonight, and he's going to bring us a list of young baseball players, somewhat prospects, and just show us some of his data on it, but not for another about half an hour till he's going to join us, but he will be coming on. So look forward to that. But before that, I want to go to some comments and see if, before we do comments, if Matthew or Josh want to jump in with anything. So Matthew, did you have anything?
I'm good to go to comments.
Josh?
Just that, you know, hoarding. I used to be a big fan of hoarding. Like, I wanted all the sets. I wanted to be a completionist and everything. And like, honestly, like, I really focused out of that into really just more focus, a narrow kind of focus on, I want these main cards from these players, and, you know, not have so many boxes and boxes and boxes of cards lying around, which I used to love. I've gotten more into not hoarding, but like companion pieces, like photos. I know Chris is going to hate this. Some tickets, sorry. But, you know, like, I have a couple game used bats, sorry. But, you know, I really enjoy that stuff. But mostly, like, I focus on Comiskey Park and Chicago Stadium, like the 2 places I grew up as a kid. And I absolutely love art memorabilia from there, like posters. I have 2 seats. I've got, you know, tickets from the games, bricks, all that stuff I love. So
I think it's important. And listen, you're saying sorry facetiously, but you know, and I know you know this, Josh. I'm just going to say, not for you, but like, there's no reason to ever apologize for what we. I know, you know, but for other people, like, you know, don't be sorry about what you collect for yourself. There's a million approaches, an infinite amount of approaches to collecting sports cards and memorabilia. We don't owe anybody an apology really for what we collect. Sometimes you want to apologize for keeping cards away from other people, as we've discussed so far. And I'm leaning more that way, but I you know, and a guy like Chris, who maybe, and I don't know, maybe Chris doesn't collect, I don't collect tickets. Maybe Chris doesn't collect tickets or want to, or game used memorabilia. I have no interest in collecting game used jerseys. Like, it doesn't interest me at all. I don't have anywhere to put it. I don't want a game. So, but I don't judge those that do. You love them. I'm happy for you. Like, that's wonderful. So, okay. Anything on that Matthew, anything you want to jump in with before comments now? One more opportunity?
Yeah, only one more. Yeah, maybe two quick things. Number one,
Sure.
I definitely wanted to emphasize that, like, when I presented this, like, only keep as many cards as you can keep in your head. So I think that I like that, but my friend Jonathan calls me an idiot for believing that I should do that, because he says you're depriving yourself of one of the greatest joys of a collector, which is like rediscovering, oh, I actually have this card. So that's a big deal. Everybody should do whatever they want to do. And question number two, and maybe we can get to it later, is Jeremy, you have this really long history in the hobby, and I'm curious to know, like, was this like the first big consolidation that you've done, or have you done something like that previously?
Yeah. Anytime this is the only time I've done a consolidation where it's cards for, I mean, I've been setting up a card shows for 20 years. So I have bought cards, sold cards, bought cards, sold cards, but I've always kept my PC. My PC has never come with me to a card show. It's distinct and separate from my card show inventory that I've had, because it's just the way I've done. But when I go to card shows, I do look through my PC and decide, is there anything that I don't love as much as I once did that can migrate from PC to card show, trader box, inventory, whatever? Because the PC is a fluid entity, right? It's always being tweaked and changed. And so but a direct consolidation, Matthew, this is the one and only time I've done it so far. Will I do it again? Maybe. I'm not going to rule it out, but this is like, I kind of saved up for the big one, I guess you could say, at least for me. Like I said earlier, or maybe even on Instagram, this is like, it's like 7.5 times the amount I've ever spent on a card. And that card that it's 7.5 times the amount of, I paid for in cash. So I've always just bought cards out of cash. But the reason I answered it with that first part is because that cash, maybe isn't directly traceable to those cards that I've bought and sold, but it's still part of the hobby, my hobby experience and my overall hobby financial performance, I guess you could say.
But it wasn't like this is like the first kind of real, like, not really invasion, but like really serious chunk like into your PC to get a card.
Yes. Oh, for sure. Okay. For sure. Yeah. 100%. This is the first time I've ever taken a chunk of cards from my collection to exchange for one card. Yeah, definitely. Okay. Put up your hand if anyone has anything before I go to comments. And go ahead, Chris.
I just would like to accept Josh's apology. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
I don't accept it at all.
Okay. All right. We'll do some comments. T. Jones says, Jeremy, do you think Gretzky cards are going up because of the Ovechkin goal race? I do not think so, but I could be wrong. Eric Young says, I'm at the stage of consolidating my collection. Great info tonight. Eric Young, I'm glad this is coming in at a good time for you. Ivan says, been consolidating my vintage baseball and basketball and adding to young stars for my nephew. I love that for my nephew part. Congratulations, Ivan. That just sounds like a great thing you're doing for your family. Bob Boozle says, hoarding is fine as long as you can walk into every room of your house. I think that makes a lot of sense. Hank says, isn't there someone who's hoarding the Jordan PMG greens who has multiples? I think, Chris, was that a big nod of agreement, Chris? Or
that is a rumor, and I think that's a great example of if somebody does have, say, half of the print run of a card, really distorts the market for that card, especially when it's a card that's highly coveted, and it can create some real weird situations, basically, for when you have a bunch of Jordan collectors trying to kind of home in on that Grail, and there's a print run of 10 and only however many of those 10 are available.
For sure. Okay, midlife. Greg says, I like hoarding sick days at work, which is completely irrational. He also says, I can answer this one. No, you don't need 150 pack pulled autos of the same player. I appreciate the advice. I take that as advice right there. Or a suggestion, let's say. Greg also says, in-person autos have more of a story and emotional connection. Exactly. I think that's what I was getting at with that distinction I made earlier. DS says, the bid-ask range usually will bite you if you hoard a certain card or if you hoard certain cards that do not have high sell volume, it's like selling securities in the gray market. Your first sale usually will be your top sale. So some advice there. Bob Boozle says, having a larger collection allows me to spend less time with my wife. Bob Boozle, everybody. There's Bob Boozle's quote of the night. Jacob Thiessen says, nice part of having multiples of players' autos is if they go up, you can sell some and still have some skin in the game, as opposed to having to exit your entire position if it's only one giant card. Yeah, assuming you want to sell it all, fair enough.
Too hot.
Thank you for that, Jacob Thiessen. OC Trust Attorney says, I do try to focus on-card autos for cards printed since 2020. Sticker autos only if it has a good-looking relic with it. And I completely hear that. I have a no sticker auto rule in my collection. I have one in my collection right now, but it's going with the consolidation. So I'm getting back in line and sticking to my no sticker auto rule in my personal collection. And Foul Ball says it is not, and this is all caps, which Foul Ball doesn't always do. So he's passionate about this comment. He says it is not hoarding. It is collecting. Stop bashing hoarding. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if we're bashing hoarding. I know I don't feel like I bashed hoarding. I'm just saying that I am moving away from hoarding certain things for various reasons. Josh?
So yeah, I'm not. I think hoarding is. I used to really be into it, and it's not really hoarding. Doesn't have a negative connotation to it. I think, in our conversation here, I think that hoarding in terms of like having every print run of every set from 52 to current Topps cards is okay. That's hoarding cards. That's fine. I think hoarding in the sense of like having 80% of a print run of a insert card, yeah, that could be bad. I think for the collecting community, but. I think an example of, I would call it hoarding, is you ever see Marshall Fogel's collection? I mean, he's a completionist in every sense of the word. He's got amazing cards, amazing companion pieces, and I don't think anyone would call him hoarding. I think it's just like a labor of love for his entire life.
Right on. Yeah. Yeah. He's built himself, probably one of the top collections in the world, right?
Probably the best collection.
Yeah. Chris C makes a great comment. I'd love to get into a Grail at some point, but not giving up my vintage to do it. It's priorities, right?
Right.
I'm going to completely respect Chris C's priorities there. And I'm giving up some of my vintage, but I'm getting vintage back, which does help. And I've been hesitant to give up some of my rarer modern cards because they are rare. The print runs of some cards I'm giving up are lower than the known copies of the Joe Jackson 1914 Cracker Jack. But those are the decisions that we have to make. So I really appreciate Chris C's comment there. Nerwin Ong says, is there such a thing as a one card collection? I'm in that stage of my collecting journey after getting all my Grail dream cards I've only dreamt of as a kid, planning to sell all, but keep one. I mean, I first of all, I have no problem saying a one-card collection is a collection, although isn't collection, maybe collection implies plural? I don't know.
It implies, I would argue that it either implies plural or there's like one card and there's other things with it that like make some theme, right? It has to be like, there's some kind of thematic piece of it, and maybe that's multiple cards or it's a card and a baseball or something like that. That's my opinion.
Yeah. Josh?
You can have a collection of one. That's what you're collecting. You're collecting this one card. That's your collection. Collection, I think we can infer plural from the word based on our own habits, but you can absolutely have a collection of one. I can give you a legal analogy that there could be a conspiracy of one person. That's how they charge it sometimes. So if you can have a conspiracy of one person, you can have a collection of one card. That's my argument.
Interesting. Chris, you got thoughts on this?
If it's not a collection, if notwithstanding that legal analogy, which I enjoyed a lot, if you have one card and it's not a collection, then what is it?
I love that's another like legal mind, legal/philosophical mind presenting a conundrum. I think that it makes a lot of sense to me. I like to think that we talk about player collections. And people say, well, a player collection, you have to have at least 50 cards of that player. Who says? No, I've always thought, like, for me, 3 cards is a player collection. And I thought I was going low, but I'm willing to say 2 or even 1. I mean, that is what I've collected that. It's my collection. It's one card. So I think I'm okay with that. But we have some other thoughts in the chat on this. Foul Ball says one card is not a collection. Bob Boozle says if someone invited me to see their collection and showed me one thing, I'd feel deceived. I think that's a serious Bob Boozle comment, and I hear that as well. I would maybe feel deceived too. I'd rather you tell me, hey, why don't you come over and see my bottle of wine, or come over and see my game used jersey. Come and have a look at my baseball card, instead of my baseball card collection. Josh?
First of all, would he feel bamboozled? But that's a separate question.
Yeah.
But I would say, if you said, come and look at my card and it's a T206 Honus Wagner, I'd say, okay, it's a pretty cool collection. If you come and look at my, 1986 Dale Strawberry, I'd be like, okay, I'd be bamboozled there. So I think it all depends on context, and I think it depends on the card, frankly.
All right. So a couple more things here. First, Hobby Champ said hoarding is buying everything and anything and never selling any of it. If you're selling anything, you're curating, and curating means you're a collector. Hoarders aren't collectors. Interesting response to Foul Ball, all caps comment earlier. I'm not ready to opine on that. That's pretty darn deep there, but you guys think about it for a second. Andrew Deutsch says in mathematics, a set, which can be thought of as a collection, can contain just one element called a singleton. Okay, pretty interesting stuff right there.
But
Dan,
can't you have an empty set as well?
So a collection of nothing. Dan's Vintage says, Josh, lawyer here too, not sure which jurisdiction has conspiracy with one person.
I've got Northern District of Illinois. I got one right now. So
Illinois. There you go, Dan. Illinois.
Chicago. Yeah.
Illinois. Slim Thumbtack says if you have just one card, it's a possession. Collection is plural. T-Dot says collection implies plurality. And
how about that idea, Jeremy, of possession? One card is a possession, 2+ is a collection.
Well, 2+ is also possession, though, right? I mean, you still possess. I possess all 1,600 of my cards.
Okay, so then,
the ones in binders.
Possession is like a big circle, and then collection is within possession. So all collections are possessions, but not all possessions are collections. I
don't know. It doesn't really add up to me somehow.
Fair enough.
Does it add up to you, Chris?
I just think I think like if we want to strike a compromise where we don't call a one card entity collection, then possession is a decent word for it. But I'm also completely fine saying a person has a collection of one card.
Yeah, but one thing I would say, if somebody had a T206 Wagner and they invited me over and said, come look at my collection, and I came over and it was a Wagner, I would say, you freaking idiot. Why didn't you tell me you had a Wagner?
Well, true.
But would you be disappointed that there's nothing else there alongside it?
I guess I still wouldn't think of it as a collection, but I would be super impressed with the object, right? It's like this person obviously collects amazing things plural, right? I would expect they would have other awesome objects, and maybe if they just had this one Wagner and literally nothing else, I would be like, this person's probably insane.
Well, Matthew also touched on the idea of curation, which is a subtle point, but the idea that for it to be a collection, it's not even about the quantity, although the quantity seems to be a necessary condition. It's also about once you have the quantity, in order for it to be a collection, there needs to be a thematic component to it that relates all the other items to each other, so that a collection almost can't be a collection needs to be two or more, but it can't just be completely random things that have no theme or connection. But instead, there's this idea that a collection must be related in some way.
Yeah, I would say that they are, if you said I have a sports card collection and they were just a bunch of random cards, I still think the word applies because they are still all sports cards. But yeah, I wouldn't want to go to that museum because it wouldn't make any sense to me.
Right.
Josh?
That'd be a very boring museum. Yeah, I would agree. But I guess T-Dot has a good point in the chat.
Yeah, I was just going to bring, because T-Dot has made two of these comments that have allowed me to arrive at my thought on this. I have a final thought on this and T-Dot made it very clear. He says, you can't have a collection of cars if you only have one. If you have a Porsche, you can't say I have a Porsche collection. I kind of agree with that. So to me, I'm now taking the position, and I'm not married to this, but right now I'm taking the position that a collection has to include more than one item. Now, if I collect baseball cards, I have to have more than one baseball card. But I can have a collection of cards and memorabilia if it's a card and a ball sort of thing.
Well, you just use the plural baseball cards, so in your
know I
sentence
did.
it would imply more than one. But if
I know I
you have a
did.
baseball card collection, you could say it's one. I'm sticking to my original position that you can have a collection of one card, or one Porsche. But
or one Porsche. Found Treasures, great offer. If you only have one card in your collection, send me a self-addressed stamped envelope, and I'll send you a card to keep it company. Now you can for sure use the word collection at that point. I like that. Found Treasures. All right.
I engage in semantic arguments every day of the week. So I mean, bring it on. So
bring it on. What a grail of a collection, Laura. Yes. Okay. All right, guys. Well, wow. Stone collector. Are we really this low? Are we really this low on topics? I'm kind of feeling the same way. We are beating this this collection topic. We're beating it down pretty hard here. Dan's Vintage says, Josh, you have a single defendant charged with conspiracy, but this. Okay, I'll let you guys talk privately about
Dan, hit me up. Yeah.
Joe, you've been waiting patiently, I think, and probably have some thoughts to wrap this topic up. But why don't you do that?
I think Nerwin should keep 2 cards, and then we could be done with this. But no, I mean, language is fluid, and context is key. I think there's a connotation in the collecting world, or at least the sports card collecting world, that a collection could be more than one, but I'm not attached to that idea either. So onward, forward.
Yeah.
All right. Good stuff. So we're gonna get Ben Hosler on here in about 5 or 6 minutes or so till he pops in. So, and Matthew, I know that we've kept you longer than scheduled. I hope you're okay, but this is a kind of a different flow. Joe,
can we? But I don't know if Matthew's planning to leave or not. But I wanted to know if Matthew is willing to share where his sites are for his next big achievement, bringing into his collection. Matthew, do you and I mean, that's a topic in and of itself. Do we share what we're going after? Because that's apparently, could compromise the reeling in of the fish or whale in some instances. But Matthew, do you mind sharing where, even if it's a general sense, not necessarily specific, where your sights might be set?
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't mind saying, so some of the cards that I have, really on my mind right now are the 49 Bowman. Jackie Robinson is a big one. The one that's kind of occupying the most mental energy for me. So it's like that, the card that's not in my PC, but it's kind of in my mental PC because I'm thinking about it so much, is the M116 Hannes Wagner is a really big one. So I've enlisted the help from a lot of different people to be like, can you help me find a nice example of that card? I know that Tony Southern Collector has a super crazy awesome example. So that's one that's occupying a lot of mental energy. I don't think it's going to require big consolidation. I don't have any of those things kind of planned, but that's a card I would like to get and will probably require me to sell some stuff in order to do so.
Nice. Good luck with that.
Yeah, good luck, man. I love the occupying my mental energy, because I've got my top 2 cards are like the Joe Jackson wasn't even on my list. I never would have mentioned it because it was a card. It's like the Honus Wagner T206 to me. So far and away something I thought I would never own. And then all of a sudden the opportunity comes, you pounce, you do it. And now I'm back to my original list because it wasn't even ever on it. It's like a PMG green Michael Jordan. Sure. Chris and Josh might want one, but is it even on the list? Is it even taking up mental energy because you probably know you'll never get one? So
no, that's I'm never having a chance. That one's way out in the stratosphere, so I can never get that. Look, I would say, Jeremy, though, you should start collecting Joe Jackson cards now. I mean, you could be a Joe Jackson super collector. There's a T210 on eBay right now. You can get that one. That's his minor league card. It's a great looking card. You should get that one. You can get his. I think there's either a Herpelsheimer or an M10. Oh, there's an M1014 you can get, and that's in the White Sox uniform. Those come up every.
I don't like those cards. I know Babe Ruth has very important cards in that set, or the card. It doesn't. It's there's no color to it. I'm not a huge black. I have a few black and white cards in my collection, but I just don't love it. I don't love the looks. I still have to like the looks of a card.
I was going to ask you if you like black and white or color more, because I mean, there's benefits to both. I love black and white photos from 1890s, 1900 stuff, and then, I mean, the color and the Cracker Jack's killer. The M101s I think are awesome black and white photos, but like you said, collect what you like. So
yeah, exactly.
Can I ask Josh a question? Josh, I don't know you, but I've gotten to know you a little bit, and I'm impressed that your range, both from vintage to maybe not ultra modern, but maybe ultra modern. I don't really know. How would you design the pie chart of your collector sensibility? Are you 80% pre-war and then 20 modern, and or how would you kind of frame your
50-50 pre-war and then 50-90s? So like I really cut it off at like honestly like 2000, 2001. Some early 2000 baseball was really cool, but like I really think like 1890s through 1946, and then really 1990s are my two sweet spots, my two favorite. I love baseball history and hockey history, and football history, and I love the cards that I grew up with. So I like kind of, I'm a bastion of worthless knowledge in that area. So it's very helpful.
Wonderful. So that's cool. 50-50, like pre-war and then 90s to 2000s, which is basically 90s, probably 97, mostly 97, 98.
Yeah, like even like 91, 92, 93, I was really buying a lot. I was like in my early teenage years, and then, through 1999, then early 2000s when I was in school, there was a card shop by the train station I used to go to after class and hang out there for a while and do some work, and then open some packs and, hang out with the guys there. So.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to do a couple more comments. We're going to bring Ben on in just 2 minutes here. So let's do some comments first, and then we'll get anything. Unless Chris, did you have something to say? Because if you do, now is that time.
Yeah. How about one card is just a sports card, and then two or more is a sports card collection?
I'm down.
Okay.
I'm down. Okay, thank you. We could not let that one rest. Thank you for reviving, but I think that put a nice bow on it. Let's go. Jordan says, all my favorite bald men. Proud to be one of them. Let's go, Jordan. Ziggy No says, I collect ex-wives. Cards are so much cheaper. I think that's right. But he says, collect friendships, experiences, stories. It's a great way, something that is great to collect for sure. And that's what this hobby brings outside of just cards, are the relationships, the friendships, and all of those things. Okay. We're going to bring Ben on from Rolling Insights. We're going to change up the discussion a bit now, guys. We're going to learn. At least I'm going to learn, and I'm excited about this because I cover the Fanatics Weekly Auction. I'm doing a show tomorrow night, and I'm going to be talking about some ultra-modern young baseball prospects, along with football cards, basketball cards, and hockey cards. And I'm gonna leverage Ben to help me learn a bit more about some of these younger players that I'm going to be looking at cards of, guys like Bobby Witt Jr., Gunnar Henderson, Ellie De La Cruz, Corbin Carroll, Julio Rodriguez, these kind of guys. So go ahead, Josh.
And Lennon Sosa, right, from the White Sox, who's an up-and-coming shortstop. Clearly,
and Lennon Sosa from your White Sox. Sure.
I thought it was Luis Robert. Not what happened to Robert.
He's gonna be gone. He's gone by the All-Star break. They're getting rid of him.
So I just want to also say now to Matthew, Josh, and Chris, you're all welcome to stay, but you can also drop off if you want. Chris, you stay. You're not welcome to drop off, but really, Matthew, because are you going to go, Matthew? Was that a goodbye? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for coming on and staying on longer than we had talked about. So I'm grateful for that. Thank you for joining us, Matthew. Always good to hang out with you, buddy.
Yeah, it's been a blast. Great chatting with you guys.
See you, man.
Yeah, cool. Ask him about Pete Crow Armstrong from the Cubs. That's my up and
Well,
coming
here.
dude.
Okay,
Josh.
I'm bringing you on, Ben. I'm bringing you on right now. Guys, there's Ben Hosler from Rolling Insights. Matthew, do you want to ask Ben something? Oh, he's gone. Okay. All right. Ben, good to see you. Welcome back. You are on mute. What's happening, buddy?
Yeah, how you guys doing? We're fighting through adversity here. My internet's out, so we're mobile tonight. But hey, that's what we can do. And any given Saturday night here on Sports Card Live, we're gonna battle through. Maybe my shot's not falling early. We can facilitate a little bit. We're gonna bob and weave a little bit tonight.
All good. It's all good. Have you been listening, watching to any of this? It's always fun because, guys, Ben, as you know now, this is his 4th time on the show, is new to sports cards, but not new to sports and statistics and player performance. And so I want to get his thoughts on what he's heard us talking about, because it's nice to get that fresh perspective. So why don't you just let us know what you've been thinking as you've been kind of lurking in the background for the last hour or so.
Yeah, really engaging conversation that you guys have had thus far. Josh, I thought it was interesting that you're a White Sox fan and you bring up Luis Robert, because I actually, I'm new to the sports card world, but I do own a few sports cards, and they are of Luis Robert because I was a big fan of his in the minor leagues. I saw him years ago in the Futures game, which was actually in Cleveland, so I was there in person. So,
Cool.
I was a big proponent of him when he was coming up, but it has not panned out to what I thought.
Same. I know.
Now, Ben, I want you to take a minute or 90 seconds, whatever it is, and just explain for people who, may be confused about what you do at Rolling Insights and what the value proposition is of Rolling Insights and sports-wise, the data service that you guys offer. And then let's get into talking about some of these players. And I really want to learn something here tonight about these players in particular, but tell us what it is first of all, and then we'll get into the players, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no problem. I might need your assistance pulling that up since I'm on my phone also, but
I got it ready to go.
Cool. Yeah. So to summarize, like I said, Rolling Insights, it's kind of 2 different parts. So we have the data feed side of things, which is B2B. So we're servicing businesses, providing data to them and their needs. They use it to power their apps or websites, all sorts of different things that they can use that for, and use our APIs. And then we have SportWise, which is more our B2C, content. Creators can use it. It's kind of like a spreadsheet on steroids. You can get in and customize stats. You can build your own data spaces and display really whatever you want. The power is kind of unlimited, and we're just now launching a custom data upload tool within the data space. So if we don't have stats in there that you guys want, you can just export it to a CSV. If you guys are familiar with, Excel spreadsheets, put whatever you want in there and then upload it back right into the data space and really do whatever you want. So there's really unlimited power to the tool. And I've tried to show you guys some examples of that thus far in my appearances. And, we're going to keep building off that and doing some really cool things here with the stats and the data and how that can translate, at least to some value of some cards and maybe just some player analysis as well.
So thanks for the explanation. Can I bring up the data set that you sent to me now? Is now a good time to put that on the screen and you can, talk a bit about it, what it's doing and how it relates to cards, and also for me, selfishly, teach me a bit about these players.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So I'm gonna go ahead first. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, if you guys watched the last time I was on, we brought up a basketball data space. So I kind of had identified some younger NBA players. I built my own stat that kind of weighed their offensive performance, and we were looking at how that correlated to some PSA 10 Prism prices for those players, and found some pretty interesting things. So what I've done for tonight is, with opening day just happening and baseball kind of being the theme for me with that coming, I built out a little data space for baseball. I took what I think are some of the better players age 25 and under, although I included O'Neal Cruz on this list and he just turned 26. So he doesn't quite meet that cutoff, but some of the better younger MLB players, no prospects, just guys that have stats from last year, and I built out my own kind of offensive score metric and weighted that out, and I put some data from Card Ladder on there with some PSA 10 prices from those players as well. And I found some interesting findings, which we can kind of dive into as well.
So before we dive in, I'm looking at this list. We got the players on the far left, of course, birthday, so we know how old they are, their team, of course. And then we have the offensive score. This is what you just referred to, I believe, as the stat that you customized. And right beside it is card price. How did you decide what card to use for this data space?
Yeah, so I'm not huge into the sports card space. As you guys know, I'm kind of learning as I go. So some of my friends are pretty big into it. So I reached out to them and they sent me some Topps Chrome Sapphire cards that looked pretty interesting. And I went and I looked at those cards and I found some recent sales of PSA 10s of those and kind of correlated that next to the offensive score. So the offensive score, like you said, this is a stat that I created, and this is the type of thing that you can do within SportWise. And this exact data space that you have pulled up, Jeremy, I actually published this to the community on SportWise. So everyone in the chat, this is free to do. You guys can go into this exact data space and play around with it. It's up on the website. Just go to the community data space page on the website. If you want to tweak the offensive score, if you want to add your own stats into it, mess around with it, you're free to do that. It's pretty elementary for the first run of the baseball one, but I made some variations of on-base percentage, slugging percentage, batting average, steals, all that stuff, and I kind of created my own mathematical formula to weight that out and how that would affect their team.
So you just said that this is free to use. It's published to the community. Anybody can go in to sportwise.rolling-insights.com and find this. And what would they use it for? It would what would they use? Now, we're card collectors here, so I think we would try to find under the radar players or players whose prices currently maybe are not commensurate with their on-field performance. I don't know that I have to think that this doesn't really take into account like regional premiums, like the Yankees and Dodgers often will sell for more sort of thing, or in hockey, the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Montreal Canadiens sort of thing, the Blackhawks. But that might be still a really nice way to look at card prices versus performance, and not having any bias enter based on regional premiums, because players do move in time as well. So you can consider that. But the two key columns in here, I believe, Ben, are the offensive score. This is your custom stat, and the card price. So if I look at this right now, I can see, because it's sorted by offensive score, I can see that Jackson Merrill with a card price of $71 might be a better buy than O'Neal Cruz, who has a card price of $204, or Julio Rodriguez, who's at $250 with a lower offensive score. Now, of course, you'd want to look into what is the offensive score, what goes into it. You'd also want to know what card we're comparing, make sure it's all apples to apples. But Ben, is that a good enough explanation of how we might use this tool?
Yeah, 100%. And I think, the stuff that we can do specifically in the card industry is really, really interesting. And we're kind of like just scratching the surface here with my first few appearances on the show. The tool itself you can use for an array of different things. I mean, we have direct sync with fantasy leagues. So if you guys play fantasy football, basketball, baseball, hockey, you can sync up your Yahoo League directly into the data space and, use it to make waiver wire moves and all that stuff. You can just create fun data spaces. Say you're a Cleveland Browns fan, right? And they have the second pick in the draft coming up. If you want to go look at, historical performances for players that were picked second in the NFL draft, you can kind of look at a comparison for something like that. But for the cards in specific, I think that, we're just scratching the surface, and there's definitely some interesting things we can do. I'm glad you pointed out Jackson Merrill, because to me, that was the first thing that stuck out to me. He's been hot to start the year through the first couple games this year. And I don't know how closely you guys follow baseball, but in my opinion, if Paul Skeens wasn't dating Livy Dunn, Jackson Merrill would have won Rookie of the Year last year. So, yeah. I mean, the fact that his card is that low, that instantly was kind of interesting to me.
I mean, that's a pretty good nugget right there. If you're somebody who is prospecting or buying younger baseball players, I don't know, you kind of convinced me that Jackson Merrill might be somebody worth picking up a card of, if the sounds like the price might be right now. But, you know, again, I want to just qualify by saying I'm not giving any investment advice or trying to push anybody in any certain cards. Rather, if you are into modern players, like young, active, modern prospects, and that, a tool like this might help you decide who to buy sooner than later, so that, you know, like right now it might be Jackson Merrill. This might tell me that Julio Rodriguez and O'Neal Cruz and maybe even Ellie De La Cruz are a little bit expensive. And I think Ellie De La Cruz has a ton of attention on him in the hobby. I know he was the flavor of the month at the end of last year, and it seems to have maybe carried over a bit this year, or a flavor of the season, let's say. I don't say that negatively. And maybe you want to wait until he goes into a slump. Maybe the card price does come down, and it would reflect on both the offensive score and the card price. Again, I'm not so certain on this. I'm kind of trying to figure it out as I go, but did that make sense to you, Ben? And if Joe, Josh, or Chris want to jump in, please do after Ben.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. And I'm glad you brought up, I'm not on here to give, you know, financial advice either. The reason why I think this is such a cool idea and such a cool tool is I'm new to the hobby and this space. So what I can do is use my background of analyzing data when it comes to sports, and I can be completely unbiased towards these cards, and just I'm looking exactly at what the data from their stats provides me, and just finding things that I think, you know, are interesting. But yeah, definitely not here to give any financial advice. And I think I'm glad that you brought up Ellie De La Cruz too, because that was the question I was going to pose to Joe and Chris, because you guys know more than me. When we went over the basketball data space, it was kind of clear to me that the defensive players that weren't ranking as high in the offensive score had lower card prices, which tells me, you know, maybe people are more interested in the flashy offensive players. And then when I look at this list and I just look at the card prices, Ellie De La Cruz sticks out. Obviously, I don't think there's a player in baseball that's, you know, more flashy than Ellie De La Cruz. So my question to you guys is, does that translate to baseball as well? Like, do you think that the flashier players just get more attention for the cards, kind of regardless of even, you know, if they're in a slump or not?
And I just want to say, you mentioned, because you know Joe and Chris, but you hadn't met Josh yet, I don't think. So Josh might also be someone who can, and I think he's ready to jump in. So why don't we start with you,
definitely.
Josh? Yeah,
I have two questions. Well, three, I guess. Is this only for offensive players? Like, do you rank pitchers or anything like that?
Yeah, so the power of this is unlimited. I can do pitchers, I can do more players. Just for the first time of doing the first run of the baseball data space, I wanted to keep it kind of a concise list of one certain type of player, just being, you know, age 25 and younger batters that I think are really good. But we definitely can do pitchers. If you go in yourself and mess around with this, like I said, it's free to do. You can add more players in, but the specific stat that I created that we're looking at right now, it just weighs offensive performance. So, you know, a pitcher it wouldn't apply to.
And then I have another question about that, which I think is cool. So you created like your own statistical category or like number.
Yeah.
What was your, I guess I'm just wondering, what was your thought of not using WAR, but using, I guess, something different? Like, what are the, I guess, pluses and minuses of that?
Yeah, I think, you know, WAR is a great stat if I'm analyzing, like, obviously real life baseball performance, but I wanted to kind of keep it elementary for the first run of this to just test out, you know, let's see if the card price correlates with, you know, what I've come up with and what I think, you know, weighs well for offensive performance. And then something that Chris and I have talked about when I've been on the show prior is, you know, he thinks that maybe PPR points for football, right? That could have a correlation for someone that you want to buy a football card of. So I'm looking at offensive stats, which mainly is attributed to what they're going to score in fantasy baseball as well. So I was trying to do like an experiment while also trying to learn, you know, what stats I want to weigh out, because this is, you know, a work in progress as I go.
That's cool.
And let me just also say, Josh, that I think it's also about the ability for rolling insights in these data spaces to be customized to your specific, because this is really originally based on fantasy sports and, you know, different leagues in Yahoo utilize different statistics, how you customize your league. So I think it's really showing the flexibility and the power of the system. So he comes up with his own score versus war. But like you said, he could put war in there as well. You could have a war column to analyze them all at the same time. But that's it, I think that helps. Sorry, you had another question, Josh.
Sorry, no, it's very interesting. Thank you. No, it's cool.
Now, Ben, you had said, you were talking about, I think you were asking a question that you posed to Chris and Joe about, I think it was about Ellie De La Cruz. Do you want, let's go back up to that for a second. Do you want to maybe repose the question, or are Joe and Chris ready to respond if you remember what that was? Chris?
Let's do the flashiness and whether that's the independent variable, with the dependent variable being price. And I think it can be. It definitely can be. De La Cruz is a great example of that. I think you can probably find examples of that in almost any sport. But I think we have multiple variables here. And the other one is going to be media. And I think a lot of the hobby, especially in the short term, is downstream from the 24-hour sports media news cycle. And it's also downstream from specific marketing campaigns that happen within the sports card industry itself, which is how you can have one of the highest baseball players in terms of market and prices right now be a defensive player who certainly, like, I'm not a baseball guy, but I don't think Paul Skeens has, a high level of flash. Does have a flashy, maybe romantic life, but he's a defensive player. But he just had a cards. Dick's Sporting Goods just purchased one of his cards on auction for over $1 million, and that's really tough. That's a really, really high bar for any player in the early goings of their career. So flashiness is definitely a factor, but I think you could have. In other words, I think you could have a flashy player that the media completely ignores, and they wouldn't be very celebrated in the hobby. And I think I think you could have a not so flashy player that the media or factors within the hobby itself really promote and advance. And I think they'll still get hobby traction, at least in the short term. So, flashy can definitely be a proxy, but I think it's more about the combination of the media tends to like the flashy players, and then the media promotes them, and that's how it gets downstream to the hobby. But there are examples like Skeens of players with not so flashy styles who are defensive who still do well too, because the media or internal hobby media has promoted them.
I'd like to add one thing. Sorry, Josh, if I may, because like Chris mentioned, media is a big deal. Regional premiums are a big deal, or at least big market regional premiums. There's all these intangibles, Ben, that you're not going to find in the box scores of the game. So to balance that out and to account for that in a data space on SportsWise, I could see you adding a column for something. Those, I don't know, I see them on websites sometimes in social media. It's like a keyword heat map where the words that have the more occurrences are bigger, and do you know what I'm talking about? It's like those, I don't know, they're like a cloud of words. The ones most often used are bigger in typeface. So you could maybe scour something, Ben, for that information to generate a ranking of media attention and mentions on Twitter or mentions on X, that kind of thing, so that if I had that in front of me too, and I saw that like Paul Skeens is like has a ranking of like 1 million, where someone like Jackson Merrill is like 500. If there was that much of a drastic difference, I would want to look into that as someone who maybe doesn't follow it as closely, and say to myself, okay, looks to me like Paul Skeens is way overvalued because he's getting way more mentions in social media than his offensive score would support. So another way to maybe utilize the tool, if that is something that this tool could utilize, would be like a ranking of keyword heat map scoring, if that makes any sense. Ben, I don't know if it does. Josh, you want to jump in before Ben answers?
No, Ben, go first. Sorry, that was a long question, so I can wait.
No, that does make sense. I mean, that's definitely something we can weigh out. Even just like social media followers, I think, is something to ponder. Like,
there you go.
There's all sorts of different things you can do, especially with the custom data upload that we've added in. I mean, we can put in, any sort of column that we want. I think that Chris bringing up media is very interesting and specific to baseball as well, just because I feel like baseball is covered. Like, if we're not even talking just market size of the teams, baseball is covered so differently on social media as opposed to the NFL or the NBA. And they've been like so behind the times, I feel like, in that for so long. It's starting to get a little bit better with the arrival of Paul Skeens, obviously Ohtani being like a global superstar. So that's something to kind of just ponder, I guess, when thinking about baseball in general, just because the social media attention is so different on the mass majority of the baseball players as opposed to an NBA star or an NFL star.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. In 1956, Tops Guy Matthew says Twitter followers is key because the card market responds to hype, which is bang on true. Bob Boozle says you got to rank the size of the chains around their necks. I think that's very astute, Bob Boozle.
Ellie De La Cruz would be number one in that.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Go ahead, Joe.
I'm going to approach this from a slightly different angle, and I'll preface this by saying I'm not up to date on the latest baseball analytics, or and I'm familiar with all these players. But baseball, from my perspective, is all about numbers and time. And so the first thing I looked at on your chart actually was that Jackson Merrill is the youngest. When you really look at, from my perspective, whether a baseball player is going to be important in the long run, it's a factor of time and consistency that yields the numbers that justify a Hall of Fame career. And baseball, more so than football and basketball, players develop more slowly oftentimes. And so it's very rare that you get someone starting to be consistent at an early age. Basketball, you come in, Hoj might throw a tomato at me here, but, you got Ann Edwards jumping in and, starting to, chip away at a 20 point per game average at a fairly early age. You got Justin Jefferson coming into the NFL. And there is some variation on when they might come into the league. Some people come in after 1 year. Baseball, it's not uncommon for a very successful player to begin putting up his numbers 24, 25, 26, which that's halfway through an NBA career in some instances. So my point is that if I were looking for a tool that helped me analyze the likelihood of a player being valuable over time and or 10, 20 years down the road, not next week or not next year, but down the road, which is how many people prospect, not all people, I would factor in their age as a key component. And I would have to sort of look at it, if possible, more than just 1 year, because there can be an outlier year. And if the more consistently you can see someone perform, batting average, RBIs, home runs, whatever it might be, that's going to be, to me, a predictor of their long-term sort of candidacy for the single most, I think, important metric in baseball, which is, are they likely to get in the Hall of Fame? And that is just something I've heard baseball collectors point to again and again and again. Is this player going to get in the Hall of Fame? Do they have a trajectory to get to the Hall of Fame?
Any thoughts on that, Ben?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think, when I work on a stat, I usually would like to use 3, 4, 5 years of data, I think, depending on what the sport is and what I'm trying to accomplish. So I do agree with that, especially baseball. There's so much noise in the stats so often than not. And I mean, there's been a lot of work done on creating more forward thinking stats as opposed to your traditional, here's how many hits, RBIs, kind of like those, as opposed to trying to create forward thinking stats. There's been a lot of work done on that, especially in recent years. So, it's kind of really untapped what we can play around with. But I agree. I mean, I would like to work on a larger sample size than just 1 year stats, and I think that makes sense about the whole Hall of Fame thing. And I think correlating with that, with Chris bringing up Paul Skeens and his card just selling for $1 million, and the whole Hall of Fame conversation, how would you guys? And this is why I didn't include pitchers initially, and I just wanted to do batters. If you have an answer, how would you guys weigh out a pitcher card versus a hitter card? Just because, especially in recent times, how often these pitchers can get hurt. With the elbow injuries and stuff, it's so common because they throw so hard and they try to do so much with the movement of the pitches. How will that affect things long term with some of these younger pitchers? Because I don't know how we could sit here and think that even Paul Skeens, as generational as he may be, how could we think that he's going to have a prolonged career like some of these past pitchers we've seen? You just can't. There's no way you can predict that.
Go, Josh.
I have one name, and it'll be relevant to this. That's Steven Strasburg. His card, when his rookie card sold, I believe when for 2012, 2014, it hit a big number. And then the next year, because he throws so hard, he blew his arm out. Then they put him on a very strict pitch count for the season, and his cards never regained. Pitchers are the worst investment, unless it's Nolan Ryan or Christy Mathewson or Sandy Koufax. The new guys, like you observe, that the premium now is on fastballs and heat, and pitchers are blowing their arms out left and right, so I think it's kind of dangerous getting into that area of assigning a value to a pitcher's card, because even look at Scherzer, Verlander, or who else is towards the end of their career that's probably going to be in the Hall of Fame. You can get their cards for relatively inexpensive amounts, and then for if I can add about hitters, I think really depends on the region and the market. An example is honestly Lewis Robert. If he was at the Yankees, if he was on any of the Dodgers, he'd be in prime time, and you'd see his face all over the news, all over MLB. Kyle Tucker was in Houston. He's a great outfielder. He's a 5-tool guy. All of a sudden, he's on the Cubs, and he's like the top 5 guys in fantasy baseball. All of a sudden, it's all you hear about is Kyle Tucker. So I think market plays a significant role. Look at Juan Soto. Look at Juan Soto. He was in purgatory in the Nationals, and then he comes to the Yankees and now the Mets, and he's one of the top players in baseball. Aaron Judge hits a ton of homers, but he strikes out a lot also. So I think market plays a significant role in that.
And Ben, to your question of how would you compare a pitcher to an offensive player, Instagram follower count. I think that might be the only way.
I'm gonna have to come back next time I'm gonna have social media score created. I'm gonna have girlfriend score rated, chain size score. I'm gonna have all sorts of stuff you guys have never seen.
No doubt. Let's do some comments here. Bob Boozles here says, I think this tool is perfect for measuring the offensive trajectory of 18 to 21-year-olds in the NBA. Chris C says, only pitchers I trust are Nolan Ryan and Koufax. I think Josh mentioned those two guys, and it's hard to disagree with that. They're both retired, so it's easy to trust them. But I like Randy Johnson and Pedro, and there's Clemens. Well, although he's tainted, but Bob Boozle says, I think people investing in Hall of Famers can look at accolades to determine that, but the flippers prospecting on young players would be more interested in a tool like this. I think that's a great point right there. Matthew says Scherzer, Verlander, Kershaw are all career outcomes that would be amazing for Skeens, but is it likely? And that's the problem we see with so much money being spent on the recently hyped players. Even Ellie De La Cruz last year, his cards were going for huge money. I have to think they've come down a bit since then, but I'm not certain. And then Chris C makes this comment. He says, Tim Duncan is still undervalued. And I say that as a lifelong Lakers fan. I bring up this comment from Chris because it speaks to the retired players. And to put that question to Ben, and the power of SportsWise and Rolling Insights is, how does it, or how could you see card collectors utilizing the tool when it comes to retired players, Ben?
Yeah, so the initial, when you just go on to SportWise, if you want to create your own kind of data space just off what we have, I think our stats go back to around 2015-ish, so it's like 10 years in the past. But with the custom data upload, if you download whatever stats you want from somewhere else years and years ago in the past, you can upload them into your data space that way. But Chris, that's a great idea. That might be my next venture here. I might have to look at some retired players in different sports and kind of look at kind of their card prices and how that would correlate. I think that's an interesting idea.
Nice. Joe, Josh, Chris, any questions for Ben on baseball players? Oh, and I guess, Ben, back to your list. Sorry, guys, as I ask you if you have questions, and ask one myself. But of these players here, is there anybody here, like, I hear a lot of hype about Bobby Witt Jr. I don't buy into the Ellie De La Cruz hype, because all I see is the hype. Same thing with the Paul Skeens. That might be a mistake on my part. But Bobby Witt Jr., like, who is the best player anyone who can opine on this on the panel, who is the best player on this list with the most potential in the hobby? So both best player, most hobby potential. Josh.
Bobby Witt Jr. hands down. He should have been MVP last year. He had the best season ever for a shortstop in the history of baseball.
Wow.
He is a 5-tool guy. He's great at defense. No, he's the real deal, and he's on a trajectory for an amazing career.
See, I'm just sort of proud of myself, because for the little amount that I follow baseball, which I really only follow baseball through the filter of the hobby, or the lens of the hobby, I would have said Bobby Witt Jr. as well. What do you say, Ben?
Yeah, it's definitely Bobby Witt Jr. No question on this list of players. Like was just said, he actually we've seen it from him, and he has the pedigree coming up, being the top prospect overall in baseball and delivering on that pretty quickly. But I think going back to the conversation about market size, where these guys play, I think it's interesting that he's the most expensive card on this list, and he does not play in a big market. Kansas City's not a big market team. So that just speaks to how good he is as a player, I think.
Well, and Dan here says Witt plays in a small market. Hobby-wise, he is limited until he gets traded or moved somewhere else, which is somewhat inevitable. And especially if he goes to like the Yankees or the Dodgers, which is where these players often go. So yeah, but it's interesting how he is still in the hobby performing as if he was with a bigger market team, but that could just be, early career hype as well. But Let's Go Jordan says Witt is legit. Rock Latex says Bobby Witt Jr. And then Andrew Deutsch says Gunnar Henderson, but I'm a biased Orioles fan. I love that Andrew throws in. At least, we know where you're coming from, Andrew. I think that's awesome. So Joe or Chris, any thoughts on this topic at this point?
Yeah, it'd be a lot harder to measure. I think social media follower count is much more empirically available and scrapable. But I think the main mechanism that drives interest in the short term in cards, especially for active players, is just how many times are they mentioned on ESPN in a given day. And I think if somebody's really they're showing up a couple times in Sports Center and they're talking about them on Sports Take on First Take, and everybody's singing their praises. The reason why that's so influential is because the market makers, especially really in the early goings with players, are dealers and investors and speculators and flippers. These guys are setting the markets, and these guys, they sit there in their office or in the card shop, and ESPN is blaring all day long, and it's coming in. Maybe it's passively, maybe it's intentionally, they're paying attention, but they're hearing the names, they're making the connections, they're looking at what's being presented to them. And I think it's really just as simple as that. It's just like picture, there used to be a card shop that I would go to, and every day was just big flat screen TV, ESPN on there, just blaring all day long, ESPN, all day long. And, everybody walks in, everybody, the shop owners, just the topic of the day is whatever ESPN was talking about, whatever highlights or. So I just think that's like the mechanism to if there was a way to measure that, who is ESPN hyping right now, I think you'd find a very strong correlation between that and card price movements on early career active players. But it also, I think, matters to retired players too, like the Tim Duncan comment. There has to be some sort of event or discussion or something that put the player into your mind. Like, one of my favorite examples is that, like, the 49ers have gone to the Super Bowl a few times in the last decade, and there's been some correlation with an increase in Joe Montana prices when the 49ers go to the Super Bowl. Joe Montana isn't playing in the Super Bowl, but there's so much nostalgia for great 49ers teams and great 49ers players just as a byproduct of the 49ers going to the Super Bowl that it plants the idea in people's heads, oh, yeah, Joe Montana, I used to love that guy. And some subset of the population are collectors who go to eBay and they start looking up Joe Montana cards and they start buying some, and it stimulates a little bit of activity. That's like the mechanism. It's like something has to put the player or the concept into the collector's head that leads them to go look up the market, go look at the market for cards as player that they can buy.
There, Joe, you got anything to jump in with?
Yeah, I mean, I think Bobby Witt makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, I am intrigued by Jackson Merrill now, Gunnar Henderson as well. The one name I want to throw out there, because I think he had a down year last year, which was the year you were using stats, is Julio Rodriguez.
Yeah.
He's already got, I think, 80 career home runs. And although he is older than some of those players on that list, I think he's already established himself. And kind of apropos to what Hoj was saying, it's not exactly a major market, but I think we all remember a very famous Seattle Mariner center fielder.
Rodriguez?
Ken Griffey Jr.
I was talking about each.
Yeah, well, right. And so, I mean, I don't know. I think there are prototypes or archetypes in baseball, and I think Julio Rodriguez might speak to some people in a way that, that price looks out of whack with last year's performance. But I think there's a reason that price looks out of whack with last year's performance, because I think of what he's done already, and also the cut of his jib, if you will.
I wanted to. Josh, you want
I'll
to
say
go?
Rodriguez had a great rookie year, and he really fell off the table last year. And so I think we'll see if he rebounds in his third year and see how he does. But yeah, he was awesome out the gate, but he stunk it up last year. So
I wanted to just touch on something when Chris was mentioning, the 49ers win Super Bowls. There's nostalgia for Joe Montana. His cards go up, and it makes me think about what's going on with this goals record chase that Ovechkin is on with Gretzky. And I've had so many people ask me, probably 3 people ask me in DMs, do you think that when Ovechkin beats Gretzky's record that Gretzky's cards are going to go down in value? And I kind of just shake my head. Like, that's one of the most ridiculous, and it's a question, but if someone had that take, I think that would just be a preposterous and ridiculous take to have. And now I see in the chat, T-Dot says, this is why Gretzky cards are going to go up due to Ovechkin's goal chase. Huge publicity. I think, well, hold on. That, Josh, I don't know if that's true, but it makes more sense to me than them going down in value. What are you thinking, Josh?
He's still the leading point scorer, right? So even the goals, he's still the all-time leading point scorer. No one's touching that. He also has so many other records for single season points. Like the top 10 are all him. So I don't think it's going down. I don't know if he gets a bump for this. I think his stuff is always, and I have a few Gretzky cards, so I don't know if I'm biased, but I have a few Gretzky cards.
Yeah, I don't know that they're going to go up, as T-Dot says, but then we see right here, he goes on to say, when Ovechkin does beat Gretzky's goal record, it will be on every newsreel in the world.
Yeah.
So, at least where they follow sport, they have sports news. And so that is going to bring attention to both players, but I don't know that Gretzky can really, he can go up. He always seems to go up, but is this going to give that an additional boost? I don't know. I wonder what the non-hockey fans on the panel think. Like, what do you think, Chris? No, I know you're I don't know if you're still a Dallas Stars fan, but I know you're not. But go ahead.
I had my fling with Jason Robertson for a brief moment there. I tried. I just baseball and hockey. Like I'm saving those for the next decade. Maybe I'll really get back into baseball.
Next lifetime, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. But with that said, like I certainly see Gretzky's name. I am outside of hockey circles entirely, and I see Gretzky's name entering everyday dialogues that I'm exposed to when the name of a hockey player almost never comes up in discussions or news sources or content areas that I look at. So I think, has it pushed me to like look at Wayne Gretzky cards? No. But I'm not necessarily the one that has to get pushed to make that eBay search. There's people who are much, much closer, I think, to liking hockey cards and possibly buying some than I am, who like this like prolonged news exposure and like the constant mentioning of the Gretzky name could certainly drive people who are closer to the propensity to do so right now. Like I could certainly see that being a factor. Yeah. But okay, there's a temporal dimension to this, which is that it lasts for as long as the news cycle lasts. But, when the name stops being mentioned and people stop hearing constantly about this Gretzky and Ovechkin battle for this record, and the name Gretzky stops showing up as much anymore. Well, now the mechanism's gone that was driving people to pick up those cards. Now it's gone. But there can be a compensating factor, which is if Gretzky did pick up a few hundred or a few thousand new collectors over the course of this, and then they stay committed to Gretzky even after the news cycle ends, then they can actually maybe sustain the new price level because now they're invested in it. Now they're interested in it. Now they've added it as a meaningful part of their collection.
Interest. Yeah. Great. I think that makes a lot of sense. Joe, do you have any thoughts?
I'm for some reason, because like Chris, I don't have the hockey DNA to really probe this. I think about LeBron surpassing Kareem in all-time points and how that affected just the overall Mount Rushmore of basketball, or at least the conversations, how it fueled the conversations. And I think in many instances, what it does is it just causes people to double down on what they already believe. And most of the hockey collectors I know, and this is through your show, Jay Lee, and you and, people that you've interacted with on this show and others, believe that Gretzky is so far ahead of everybody as the GOAT that's what I'm getting from this historical moment of Ovi taking over in goals. Great for him, gold star for Ovi. But most of what I'm hearing is Gretzky is still by far the GOAT.
Yeah, that's where I land. Ben, anything to say on this?
No, I mean, Joe and I kind of have this telepathy going. I've only been on the show a few times, but I was literally going to ask, like, if there was any correlation, like when LeBron passed Kareem for the points. I think it was kind of a 1-for-1 comparison. But, yeah, I'm as far away from hockey as you can get. I don't even think most high schools near me have hockey teams. So I'm not one to comment on that. But I will say anyone I know that is into hockey, kind of that same sentiment. Like, they're so high up on Gretzky being the best ever. Like, it's, like, completely untouchable.
Yeah, I thought Joe's analogy to Kareem and LeBron was awesome there. Okay, I'm going to go to some comments here, guys. Ron Fig in the house. What's up, Ron? T. Dot says eyeballs are currency. I think we can all agree to that. Dan says Bobby Witt needs an influencer girlfriend, to which Let's Go Jordan says Bobby Witt is married, to which Dan says being married is hobby poison.
I'm gonna have to weigh that out. When in the O's fan in chat, they actually brought up the O's, who Adley Rutschman is a great player, and he actually had a great spring training and started off opening day with multiple home runs. He ditched an influencer girlfriend, so now I'm gonna have to weigh out how the influencer girlfriend affects things, and when you ditch an influencer girlfriend, it's both sides of the coin.
Both big events.
Very sophisticated analytics there.
Yeah. Laura says Gretzky has no risk of handing over the GOAT title to anyone, period. Ron Fig says Gretzky is the great one forever. Nothing will change this. But then Sundin says, well, what if McDavid wins 4 straight cups? And I say, that's just like Sundin, as much as I'd be happy for that to happen, it's not going to. I don't know if he's going to win 1 cup. Their team is, I believe the Oilers are so bad. They're just so bad, except for him and Draisaitl. It's a sad state there. I think he's further away from a cup right now than he was last year, and I don't see it getting better. Josh, thoughts?
Yeah, no, their defense stinks this year. I think Winnipeg's
too.
Yeah, goaltending's horrible. Winnipeg's going to win the cup, but I just think that I mean, McDavid could win 4 in a row, big deal. Gretzky's still, I mean, it's a non-conversation, I think. So.
Colin Murray says Gretzky and OV cards will go up on his way to 1,000 goals. Not the best goal scorer. OV has cemented that. I don't know what that not the best goal scorer comment is, but Colin's basically saying both cards are going to go up on Ovechkin's on his way to 1,000 goals. So he's at 889, I think, right now. The record, he'll have the record at 895. And then 900 is another milestone that he's most likely to get to. That isn't going to do anything more than 895 is the big goal, but 900 is kind of cool. We've never had a 900 NHL goal scorer. So that'll be fun when we get there. Okay, guys, listen, I think we're going to go through final comments and we're going to wrap up this episode because we're at 3 hours and 15 minutes. I originally had this scheduled for 2.5 hours, but here we go. We are here. By the way, hello to Lapper. Winnipeg will be bound second round or first if they catch the Blues. Yeah, St. Louis is just a crazy team right now.
They're hot. Yeah.
They're hot. They're hot. Okay. So, first of all, thank you guys and Matthew as well for joining the show tonight. Great to have you back, Josh. Always fun when you're on. Ben, good to have you back. I know we had to defer a week, so I'm glad you're here, and thank you for coming on. Always interesting. Always enjoy your company on the show. My guy Joe, of course. Our closer, Chris, who came in early. He had to come in early. Middle relief, I guess you could say. Always good to have Chris here. And the chat. The chat is the MVP of the show. Thank you to the chat for being here tonight. As always, we love you guys. And just what a great chat tonight. You guys were amazing. Bob Boozle, I inputted all the elements of the show into a spreadsheet and it revealed this was a good show. Thank you, Bob Boozle. T-Dot, thank you very much. Andrew Deutsch, fun live stream. Guys. Thank you, Andrew, for being here. Let's go, Jordan. What I learned tonight is never get married. Oh, too late for some of us, but not for you, I guess. Thank you, Laura. She says, thank you, Jeremy, and your awesome guest. Thank you, Laura. Appreciate that. As always, good to see you in the chat. If anyone has anything they'd like to say before we wrap up, let me know. Otherwise, we're just going to end this kind of quickly, but or we'll just give you a chance, everybody, to say goodnight. So, guys, unmute yourselves and say goodnight, please.
Good night.
I don't think they want my lullaby, Jeremy. I don't know.
No, you have to sing. No singing. I appreciate all you guys being here. But Robert Scott, insightful conversation. Thank you, Chris. T-Dot, prenup. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chris C. GC, good to see you. Stiffy, where's Stiffy? We all love Stiffy is Chris's brother, by the way. We all love Stiff Arm Wax. Okay, guys. Well, thank you all again for joining and the chat. I'll be back live here on the channel tomorrow covering the Fanatics weekly auction, a little bit of a watch party. We'll be covering all 4 major sports. It's the new format. I'm excited about that. This show is available on Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen to your podcast. Please check that out. Please support all the partners and sponsors of Sports Cards Live. You can see them all in the video description below, including Rolling Insights, where Ben is from, Card Ladder, where Chris is from. If you want to subscribe to Card Ladder, you can go ahead and do that. There's an affiliate link here. Josh, Midwest Vintage, is also a partner in 90s auctions, right up there above Joe. And Josh, when are you launching your next auction?
April 21st is our next auction. It runs through May 4th. April
21st to May 4th. Check out, guys, please check out Midwest Vintage Cards and 90s auctions. And all, again, I appreciate all of the partners and sponsors we have here, and it means a great deal. If you can support them as best you can, it's much appreciated. Stiff Arm Wax is right there in the chat. Says, great show as usual. Josh Jarez, what's happening? Thank you, Foul Ball. Let's go, Jordan. Thank you very much, Yankees fan. And Mr. Minty calls out Sim Sarna, which is that's awesome, Mr. of Cloud 10, where the Sports Cards Live podcast resides, on part of the Cloud 10 network as well. Thank you for that, Mr. Minty. Good to see you, Steve. Stiff Arm, you guys better nail that outro line. Good call. Good call. This is all the pressure is on Joe and Chris. We're not going to put the pressure on Josh and Ben. We're going to put on Joe and Chris, guys. With that, here for March the 29th, 2025, on behalf of myself, Joe, Josh, Ben, and Chris, this episode is now
over.
Over.
And good night.